Hey guys, welcome to The Grey Escape. I'm Natalie Gray, and this show is brought to you by the best company for international money transfers involving currency exchange. Go to thegreyescape.com/cash, and not only can you save 90% over bank fees and PayPal, you'll get the best exchange rates and a free transfer just by going to thegreyescape.com/cash. I'll be back in just a moment, and we will have a catch up right here on The Grey Escape. So I've been gone. It's going to come up in today's episode, so you're going to get an explanation for my absence. And I want to thank those of you who sent emails and messages saying that you were missing the show. That really meant a lot to me. So what happened? Well, sometimes life's journey takes an unexpected detour. Happens to a lot of people, not just me, and reasons can involve, for example, family and perhaps illness. And that's what I've been up to. I've been helping my family in Canada to the best of my abilities support the care of my lovely aunt, who was diagnosed 4 years ago with a terminal illness. You know the one. And they say every cloud has a silver lining. And this was a very bleak cloud, the blackest cloud for so many of us who loved and adored my aunt. But that silver lining is that during her care, I was reconnected with so many of my relatives in Canada. Amazing, beautiful people, just like my aunt. So guys, listeners, I'm really sorry that I've been away for so long, but I committed 1,000% to helping an individual and her family. And if it helps, I believe that those efforts paid off because my aunt vastly exceeded the time frame that she had been given by doctors. In fact, I was personally told by one of her medical specialists that they had never seen such an extension of life in her circumstances, and they credited it fully to the love and care of her family. And that's what she deserved, the unwavering love and care of her family. And that's what I committed to. Not the best choice for a podcaster, but maybe the best choice as a human being. Okay, so that's that. Today, we go to BBC Caversham in the English countryside, and there's a bit of trivia with this particular location of the BBC. There was a clue when I arrived, literally in the middle of the countryside. There's this major entrance security happening. I'm like, is there a goat problem in Caversham? Turns out during World War II that this location was where the British government would monitor all of the foreign media and propaganda. From this location, they were able to stay clued into developments during the Cold War, the disintegration of the Iron Curtain, and the collapse of the Soviet Union. So not just goats. And on to today's guest. He went from humble origins in Liverpool to becoming one of the most recognizable voices in British radio, including 10 years on Capital Radio's breakfast show with Chris Tarrant. For global listeners who may not listen to British radio, you may still have heard of him nonetheless via his own brilliant podcast, The Unexplained with Howard Hughes, which made its debut in 2006 in those very early days of podcasting. Howard's show covers fascinating topics from UFOs and the paranormal to science and conspiracy. And what I like about The Unexplained with Howard Hughes is that it is delivered with such intelligence and warmth, and most importantly, integrity. I also learned, as Howard very kindly bought me a cup of coffee at the BBC, that we share the same birthday. Kinda neat. Or spooky. One of those. If you hear another voice in the background of this interview, that's my partner Jason, who sat in to join the fun. So here it is. I'm very excited to bring you this interview with the main man himself, Mr. Howard Hughes. Right, we're rolling, Howard. Is that what they say around here? They probably don't say rolling. They probably say we're live.
Well, they probably got no time to say anything apart from, right, that's it, you're on. And then the red light goes on, and that's what sorts the men from the boys, I think, you know.
Have you got any idea how many thousands of times that red light has gone on for you?
For me, oh, Lord, it must be in the hundreds of thousands in different places. I have actually lost count, Natalie, of the number of places that I've worked. I think it's probably 22 radio stations.
Wow.
It's a lot of places, isn't it?
So how old were you when when people first heard your voice? And did you sound like this at 12?
No, but I was always bemused because I went to, at 12, I was at what they used to call a secondary modern school. It was not a nice place to be. It was very rough. It was a bit of an educational bin in Liverpool. And in fact, so much did I hate it that I went up there around the time they knocked it down just to make sure they got every brick. Which, you know, so I was there and I was always a bit bemused when some of the teachers who were more like the staff of a borstal or a prison, you know, they were not really teaching stuff. Some of them were nice, but most of them were kind of more into discipline than education. That's what this place was like. It was hard. And I'd be walking down the corridor talking because that's what I do. You and I share a birthday. You know, Gemini's talk.
Yes. And we're fabulous.
And as far as I'm concerned, I know we have an audience that would agree, there's no one better. But the teachers would shout in a Preston accent. Nothing wrong with Preston, but they'd shout, Hughes, shut up. Keep your mouth closed. You've got the gift of the gab, you have.
Wow. Even as a kid.
Even as a kid.
Wow.
But they were always picking me to read things. And I never understood why. One of my school reports said Howard speaks clearly and with authority, but must be careful not to talk down to people. And I quote, that's because the teachers hated me, because I think I probably spoke better than they did. But I didn't know. You know, I came from what will be called today the wrong side of the tracks. Yeah, I don't come from money or anything like that. I don't have an issue with it, but, you know, people always assumed that I was, and I wasn't.
Well, you sound posh.
Do I? Oh,
That's
God.
why they think you've come from money. You sound posh.
Well, you know, if you want me to talk like that in a Liverpool accent, like some of my relatives do, then I can. I mean, this all goes back to my dad. My wonderful father, who was a Liverpool policeman and a wonderful, kind, decent man, the original Liverpool good cop. He had a very thick, my accent, my voice is like his. The tone of it, the timbre is like him. But overlaid with it was a Liverpool accent. And it had held him back. And he always felt he was in the army and then in the police. And when we go on holidays to posher places like Devon, he would get my mum and I to go and ask if they'd got accommodation because he believed that if he went with his Liverpool accent, this is so sad, to the front door of these places, they wouldn't accommodate us. There wouldn't be a room for us because we were Scousers.
Well, what's sadder is that he's probably was correct.
He was correct,
you know,
but it was wrong.
Right.
So I was determined at that point in this bin of a school to improve myself, not for me, but for him and for them, my mum and dad. And that's why I've done everything that I've done, really. I wanted them to be proud. And also, I didn't want us to be looked down on by anyone because Liverpool's a wonderful city and Liverpool people are great people. And it used to concern me as a child that people would look down on you just because of how you spoke.
Right.
So I changed my accent. They thought I was nuts when our school became a comprehensive after that. And that's when I got a good education, when the system changed.
No longer a bin.
No longer a bin. The bin was got rid of. A lot of those teachers were pensioned off or, you know, put where they couldn't harm people's prospects anymore.
People's lives.
Yeah, and, you know, some of them undoubtedly did. You know, we don't have to name names here, but there were some who were, most of them not with us now, but, you know, they didn't do anybody any favors, you know, mostly me. So when we became a comprehensive, I was able to get an education. There were teachers there from an old grammar school that had merged with the secondary mod, and they brought the same style of education there. And they realized that they thought I had potential. They realized I had something, and they helped me. And I will be eternally grateful to various people like Miss Jones, who became Mrs. Barrett.
Wow.
And Mr. Smith, the English teacher, who introduced me to things like John Steinbeck. They did a lot for me. I'm sorry, I probably haven't answered. It was about accents. I changed my accent, and they all thought I was nuts because I rounded out my afters to afters, which I can't say after now to save my life.
Did you do it voluntarily, though, or did you go take elocution lessons?
Oh, no, I did it myself. I was listening to the BBC. I listened through the night to BBC World Service, where they were terribly, awfully posh. And unfortunately, for a while, used that as a template. So I became stupidly posh for a while. It was a process of adjustment. I was going through trying to lose what I had because that was what was expected if you wanted to get on those days.
Right.
Quite rightly, it's not expected now. So I went through a posh phase before I got to a neutral phase. Right. And now there's a little bit of Liverpool in there and I don't care.
What age was this that you started to say after? Instead of
14.
14, so really young. And when you say the teachers helped you, you'll be eternally grateful to Miss Jones. How did they help you?
They showed me that there were possibilities for people who came from my background, that it was possible for somebody like me, whose grandparents lived in terraced houses in cobbled streets in Liverpool, to get an education, to consider going to university. I thought university was for toffs and snobs. And I was determined to go to a polytechnic. I said, I'm not going to, university. I'll go to a polytechnic. They're the people's universities. I'm sounding like a rabid left-winger here. I'm not. I don't have any politics really. I have disdain for them all. But the system changed and undoubtedly I was helped to realize my dreams. I wouldn't be doing any of this had it not been for the people who took an interest in me and helped me to get on. So I'm glad that I've got a chance to say that somewhere. Yeah,
it's like the movies that win the Oscars always kind of seem to have that story. Somebody from the wrong side of town. And it just takes that one person who believes in you to change your life.
Yeah.
I'm still looking for that person.
So. Come on now, Natalie. There must have been a Svengali figure for you in all of this.
Oh, I've had a lot of letdowns. You said before we even were rolling, I think within seconds of meeting, well, you know how you get a lot of knocks, Natalie.
Well, no, you do. And I didn't believe that. I had a starry-eyed view of it all. And one of my teachers at that school, who was another English teacher there, she said, my daughter is in the BBC and you have to be tough. And you've got to take a lot of knocks and come up smiling every time. I've never forgotten that because I thought she was wrong. And the years have proved her right. You do. You have to be kicked and knocked and banged. Right. And many people that I started with are no longer doing this. You have to rise from it. I've had some... Look, the places that I'm working now are places that I want to work. And I'm never going to be a millionaire, but I'm happy, which is much more important than making money and being unhappy.
Right.
I have had some of the foulest treatment by some people who ought to have known better and never will. And, I haven't really warranted it. And a lot of people said, Howard, you influenced us and all the rest of it. But that didn't stop me being battered like that. You just have to take it in this business. But on the upside, I have known some truly wonderful people that I wouldn't have met had I not gone into, what we might call showbiz. Right. So let me not be too much of a downer about it. But to anybody listening to this who might want to go into all of this, and you do stand up, you must know this more than I do. You've got to be strong and harder. I was soft because my parents loved me so much they protected me. So the batterings hurt.
Right. Well, I mean, the batterings hurt and continue to hurt me, to be honest. One of the things, stand-up aside, I mean, when you go into stand-up, you're going to have some big hits when you basically bomb. So that's going to happen. But I've done other things in entertainment that have had big hits, like shows that I'll create a show idea. I went through years of coming up with show formats and had so many deals on shows, but then they wouldn't wind up on TV. So they'd be tied up in deals and it would all be very exciting. And then just very casually, you'd get the phone call, yeah, we're not moving forward with it. And those I found tremendously disappointing because I would have invested, for example, a year of my life being dragged along with the development of the project.
And how do you cope with that, Natalie?
Well, truthfully, I have, my life's gone a bit like a pendulum and I've aborted entertainment. I'm just like, I'm done with it. So in Los Angeles, for example, in 2010, I'd had a bunch of show ideas that had got deals on them. And there was so much action that it just seemed that something had to really take grip. And then it didn't. one by one, the bricks came away of my foundation. And I was like, you know what? I'm opening a gallery because I paint as well. It's not something I studied. I just happened to be able to do it. And I opened a gallery, and I was literally like, I'm not going to do anything to do with entertainment for at least 2 years. And it was very, very healthy. And the gallery, I showcased over 200 artists, which was just very nice and very nurturing on a kind of more spiritual vibe.
So did something happen that got you back into it?
Yeah, it was stand-up comedy, actually. I got an opportunity to go with my partner back to England, and we were only going to go for 4 months in 2012. And here we are 5 years later, still with a base in the UK. And individually, we did a lot of stand-up, and that 4 months turned into much longer because we just got some incredible opportunities that you would never get stateside. We got separately the chance to do a 5-day tour of Croatia doing stand-up. And it was the same tour Eddie Izzard had done.
What, in English?
In English, yeah. And they are so appreciative. They speak English, especially, you speak slow. And weirdly, my weird accent, I think it's about the most it's ever served me, because the bookers said that I was the most understandable comedian because I spoke a little bit slower than a lot of the Brits who were very, very fast-paced in their speech, blah, blah, blah. So, but that's what got me back into entertainment with the stand-up comedy,
I think I have endless admiration for people who do stand-up. I know what it's like to speak to audiences. And thanks to Chris Tarrant, who I worked with for 10 years, big entertainer in the UK, very well known on TV and radio. I was on his Capital Radio breakfast show for a decade, got to know him very well. I was very shy up to the point that I started working with him, and he taught me how to walk into a room packed with people and win them over, to the point where I actually, towards the end of my time at Capital, did something that I would never have thought I could do because I'm a shy, very shy person. A lot of entertainers and people in media say that. I am, very, very. And I was able to go on stage in front of 100,000 people at Party in the Park and just talk to the audience. Now, stand-up, though, is a completely different thing. To make people laugh, I will whimsically make people chuckle occasionally with things that I say, sometimes inadvertently. But to go and deliberately want to deliver an act to people and expect a reaction from them, hope for a reaction, I just don't know how you do it.
Well, the question is, Howard, do I do it?
Well, I've watched your videos on YouTube, and yes, you do. So there.
What did Chris Tarrant tell you? I want to know what this advice is of how you immediately engage an audience and have them like you.
No, Chris didn't tell me anything. For a long time, he was like a sort of big brother to me. I mean, there was a time when people used to say, he could be your older brother kind of stuff. And although he was a millionaire entertainer, we just kind of got on very well. And I learned by watching him. The first 6 months on his show were very rocky. I was not getting it right. I was not being funny. I was saying the wrong things, which I thought were funny and weren't. And it was touch and go for the first 3 months, definitely. And then suddenly something clicked. And it clicked to the extent that his former Breakfast on Air partner, Morning Drive partner, she did the travel news, Cara Noble, who now lives in America. Cara left. And they had a gap for somebody to go on the remotes, the outside broadcasts with them around the world. So they tried me out with one to Maui, Hawaii. And it worked so well that I did all of them. And I learned from watching him how you deal with people. He would go through, without even knowing it, his act when he, oh, look at you, and he'd take over. And I've learned how to do that. I've learned, look, we're Geminis, both of us, and I have a certain amount of belief in this sort of stuff. We are personable people. So he taught me how to amplify that about myself. And I'll be forever grateful to him. Lenny Henry always says that Tarrant taught him television techniques.
Wow.
Well, he taught me people techniques, I think. And sometimes I'll sort of lapse into him occasionally. Only when I ceased to work with him did I learn to do the impression of him. And, now I can. But when I worked with him, could I do it? No, I couldn't. But now I can. So, he would say, and he'd say, Howie, I don't do that. He has this giggle. He goes, ah. And he'd say, Howie, for God's sake, I don't do that. And then he'd be talking to somebody and he'd go, ah. And I'd go, yes, you do. We had a wonderful time. We did. it was of its era. People keep telling me, oh, look, I've had some health issues. I was in hospital in Kingston a few weeks ago having a test. And I was very, very, very frightened, like a child. And one of the nurses, all the nurses were lovely. They were so nice. At one point, my blood pressure went so high they couldn't even do this procedure.
Wow.
So they had to calm me down. I was frightened for my life. And this woman comes in, she said, Howard Hughes, you were on Capital Radio. I used to listen every single morning. It was the biggest thing. I don't listen to radio in the mornings anymore. For a lot of people, sadly, because the market is so fragmented now, and there is no scope for doing shows like that where you flush the format. Forget it. You just talk and laugh and interact. There's no room for that anymore. So the audiences for all of these stations have fragmented and they've plummeted.
Wow.
It was of its era, but it was big. I don't think I can conceive of the size of the audience now. It was at its peak 2.5 million in London. Literally, there were things that would happen. I was going home on the tube once, and opposite me was a woman reading a magazine article about me. And there was my grinning face. And she didn't realize that the person she was avidly reading about from the London radio was there, directly opposite. It was weird. I met people like David Bowie, Lionel Richie, Paul McCartney. I played Shania Twain this morning. I had a very difficult interview with Shania Twain because I was slightly nervous, not prepared for this particular one. And I asked her the same question twice, and she's a sharp cookie.
Oh.
She said, Howard, you asked me that before. And then there were other people which didn't go well. She was very nice, but...
was that live?
No, it was recorded. Thank God. And Debbie Harry was lovely. And look, I've met loads and loads of people. We had a standing joke on the Tarrant show about Lionel Richie. Because I like Lionel Richie, but I used to say, I can't stand his music. He's insipid. That thing, Hello, that he did, he should be put in prison for that. What a disgusting record that was, Hello. I mean, it's the most insipid thing I've ever heard. And I would play up to it on air. So when Lionel Richie came to London to be on Party in the Park, they said, Howie, we've got a treat for you. We want you to interview Lionel Richie. And Lionel Richie turned out to be the loveliest, nicest man you could ever meet. What a gentleman.
How was David Bowie?
David Bowie was great. David Bowie, Tarrant said, come on, Howie, you can ask David a question or two. So I said, okay, let's ask him one that no one else has asked him. I said, David, how do you feel about the fact that everybody does an impression of David Bowie? They all do this, he. And he said, and how do you feel about everybody doing an impression of Howard Hughes? Touche, David Bowie. He was very down to earth. Paul McCartney, when he was in, with Tarrant, he was ignoring Tarrant. We were just talking about Liverpool.
Well, you would, wouldn't you?
We were talking about going back to Liverpool and what it was like there, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, you guys would be like long lost brethren, wouldn't you, running into each other?
Well, kind of, but...
there can't be that many people running around, you know, staunch sort of Liverpudlians.
I think we're all loyal to the place, you know, even though we haven't... You know, my dad died 3 years ago now, and I haven't been back since then. I don't get back there that much. I've done some broadcasting there, filled in for a man called Pete Price, who's a Liverpool legend. I did his late talk show there for a while, and it was nice to go back. And people would phone up and they'd say, it's a very tribal thing there. They'd phone up and they'd say, listen, I don't know what it's like where you come from in the home counties. And I would say, I was born 5 miles from this tower in the centre of Liverpool, in Bootle. Ask me any question you want, all right? And they'd say, I'd get, at the beginning, I'd get some emails saying, you sound like Tony Blackburn. What are you doing up here? It took me a long time to win my Liverpool credentials on air. And I'd been away for a long time. But I love it, and it's in my heart.
I've got a spontaneous question that I hadn't thought of sprung to mind.
That's a bit difficult then.
And it's involving Liverpool and conspiracy and Paul McCartney.
Oh, yes.
Can you guess what the question is?
Paul McCartney died in a road accident in 1966 and was replaced by fake Paul. Yeah, that one.
So what do you think of this reverberating conspiracy that's taking over YouTube?
What do you think of it, Natalie?
Well, I did watch the videos. At first, my response was, this is the most ridiculous thing. How far will people go to make up this stuff? Then I watched the documentary, and I've painted a lot of portraits in my time. And so I have a keen eye for looking at faces. And I must say that the gentleman they say replaced him, he was certainly a dead ringer. And then there was photos, and of course you don't know what's Photoshop, but there were photos where it did appear to be two separate guys in those early press photos.
They do look different, and I accept that. The two people, if there are two people, which...
Faux Paul, Fallen Paul.
Fallen Paul. They do look different, and there are staggering differences. I mean, there are people who claim that the eyebrows are at a different angle and the nose is a totally different shape.
And his toes, got different toes.
I didn't know about his toes.
Oh, yes.
Okay. I haven't checked out his toes. I didn't know him that well. But I've got to say, I'm not sure what I feel, because if I look at pictures of me, what did I look like at 18 and how did my face change up until 22? My face became more angular and they look like different people. So perhaps he was just growing up, or maybe there was more to it. I don't know. I keep an open, because I do The Unexplained.
Right.
And, I'm so glad you mentioned it. Because I do The Unexplained podcast and my radio show, I keep an open mind about these things, and I'm always willing to be convinced. I have had a guest about it. It's one of two editions that you will never hear, because it was somebody who, although nice, had clearly only been reading other people's stuff and had done no research.
Oh,
so
I
can't
you had to
really,
record it and then not air it?
Yeah, I was nice about it, but I can't air it because there was no solid fact to it. And my listeners would batter me over the head if I put that out.
So are you saying you're not going to play a role in fake news? What kind of journalist are you?
Well, there is an old journalistic saying, which I'm sure you know, let not the facts stand in the way of a good story. Not that I adhere to anything like that. News is about shaping the agenda, I think people do. Although we say we reflect, there is a certain amount of shaping going on, because you've got to hammer it down into a form that people can understand, a manageable form. So inevitably, because we're human beings, I won't say spin, but everybody will shape and structure the news in their way. And of course, the other thing is the ordering of stories. You have the choice. Who decides what the order of stories should be? Well, you do. And that has to come down to the merits of the news, but also your personal preferences about stuff, I think.
I mean, the other thing about the news that I always think and keep in mind is they have to make news that is going to grab an audience. The news has got to capture people. So there has to be an element of drama or unrest or surprise. There's got to be an element in the news that makes you go, oh, I want to watch that. Because if it was just, hey, so-and-so's in town and they're having a great time and they're having dinner and, it needs to be so-and-so's in town and they were caught stealing cigarettes. There's got to be some twist to make people want to watch the news.
Well, you can always, I'm always talking to young journalists and they're talking to me. You can always make a thing interesting, not by lying about it, but simply by going through the facts and writing it up in an interesting way, keeping it short. And I defy, there are stories that are quite boring, but I defy anyone not to find a way of presenting something that is pithy. I mean, here, I don't write the news. I read the news at this BBC station that I do some of my work at. And my colleagues ask me, what do you think about this and how would you word this? And I'm always doing rewrites in my head, even though, I don't write the news anymore. I won awards for it. There was a course in London, I think it might have been Goldsmiths. It was one of the courses where they used to, I didn't even know this until just a few years ago. They used to have Howard Hughes days where they would go through my copy.
Oh, wow.
Because I was the first to do that kind of snappy stuff.
That's very impressive.
So it's all about selling. I always used to say to young journalists, if ever I do try, I've done training as well, been up and down the country doing that. And I'd say, there used to be a company that made radio station jingles in Dallas called PAMS, right? And they made the original Radio 1 jingles, the WABC New York jingles, the KHJ Los Angeles jingles for everyone, everywhere, including the very famous Series 27. Check out Series 27. It was used by so many radio stations. And if you know lines like "Remember This Golden Classic," that was in Series 27. The boss of Pam's in Dallas had a wooden plaque on his desk with these words on it: "Selling spoken here." And that's what I used to say to people in the news business. You don't get a free ride. A thing isn't interesting just because you think it is. You've got to try and present it in a palatable and understandable way. And don't kid yourself. Most people, including me, on an average kind of not very interesting day, will remember the first thing that you say and the funny story at the end. And that's it. Unless it's huge. And then you're in a different territory.
Right.
And I've done 9/11 and Death of Diana. I was on air in London, to London, as that happened.
Oh, my goodness.
Which was an astonishing thing to do.
Did you find, I mean, I was going to ask you if your emotions have ever gotten the better of you during a broadcast, and that would be one time that you would almost expect it to.
I think Diana and 9/11, there were times when I felt myself being upset audibly by it. I went to New York for the first anniversary of 9/11 for Capital Radio. They put me up in the Marriott Financial, which is a hotel that was badly affected by what happened. It was covered in dust and it was closed for a year. I went there just as it reopened for the first anniversary. And some of the stories that people told me made me cry.
Yeah.
But those people became friends. I was that English guy who was reading the news for London. Can we let him use a fax machine here? You can use, I went to one of them and they said, you can use our facilities here. And I said, what? I can go to the canteen. He said, canteen? What? He said, look, you're English, aren't you? He said, canteen? Here in New York, a canteen is a tin thing that you carry water in. It's the cafeteria. You can use so I was using the staff cafeteria. That was a very moving experience, so much so that when I moved to LBC, which was run by a company called Chrysalis, it was not my greatest move to leave the Tarrant show to go to that. But they sent me over to New York as well. But the difference between Capital and LBC is run by Chrysalis, who don't exist anymore, so we can say this, is that Capital flew me business class. Chrysalis put me on Economy Air India.
Right. that should be a clue right there, shouldn't it?
That was the difference. And on both occasions, I was awake. I never thought I could do this, but you'll know about this. We do have capacities we don't realize. On both occasions, I was awake more or less with the odd 15-minute nap for 72 hours.
Wow. Oh,
and adrenaline and excitement saw me through it.
Yeah.
So I've done all the hard news. It's a great shame that some people will see me as a lightweight because, I'll be doing what I did this morning when we met, playing records on the radio and talking to people. But I don't only do that.
No, that's right. You have the full spectrum that you're capable of, I think.
I'm not saying that I'm any good at any of it. But
you can Walter Cronkite it.
Well, we all loved one. Dan Rather was my man. I loved Dan Rather. I had an American girlfriend some years ago, and she took me to her wonderful parents in Florida, in a place called The Villages, a retirement village there. And we watched the election, the famous hanging Chad election, the one that Bush was elected.
Okay.
And, that one. I went into Subway in Florida, their Subway branch, and the guy said, welcome, you're English, welcome to Florida, the screw-up state, he said. Because it was Florida that was the decider
yes.
in that. But Dan Rather, with his square jaw, and he would, whenever a piece of breaking news came in on that coverage, he'd say, bulletin. And I just thought, what a great use of the word bulletin. For us, a bulletin is a bulletin of news, darlings, on the BBC. For Dan Rather, bulletin is a piece of breaking news, piece of paper, bulletin.
Have you gotten to say that?
No.
Come on, you could, though.
I stole a lot of gambits from American radio, but not that one.
Say it now. Go on. It's your chance.
Bulletin.
Nice.
Hey, bulletin.
I'm listening.
Yeah, I might actually get a tick and start saying it all the time. Bulletin. What time is it? Bulletin. So Dan Rather was doing this, and he obviously written down some similes and metaphors and analogies to use in the program. And he just said, the Democrats went through that state like a wheel through a cornfield. And I just thought, you are God. It's so cool, is that? But I stole all sorts of ideas from American radio, like you'll hear now radio stations say, so-and-so told LBC. I was the first one to do that because I heard it on American radio, told Capital. So it means that it's your product telling us, not just telling anyone. Then we went and did the show in Maui, Hawaii, and we stopped over in Los Angeles. And I listened to a news station called KNX, Rolling News, KNX, News Radio, still there. And they said, so Senator so-and-so tells KNX. And I thought, tells? Wow, that's so present. I came straight back to London. I couldn't wait to do Tells Capital. A lot of that stuff is not being done anymore, sadly, because it's all down to accountancy these days. So most of the copy is much the same stuff read in a slightly different way. The luxury of having one person to make a bespoke news for one radio service does not exist anymore. And I think that's sad. I think they're missing a trick. There is no personality news anymore, I don't think.
I would think to an enormous amount of people in the UK who've followed in your footsteps that you are the UK's Dan Rather.
No.
I think your voice is so distinct and famous.
Well, I don't know. Look, this is an era where they want people to read the news that just sound like anyone. You know, it's not the era of the announcers, who were the people that I revered when I was growing up, both here and in the US particularly. It's gone. So this kind of voice is not necessarily on this side of the Atlantic what they want. Well, I say the public don't get a say. Listeners might feel differently. I don't know. I mean, I still get recognized in London. You know, I live in London and I get recognized, not for what I'm doing now necessarily, although the odd taxi driver will have heard me. I mean, look, I bump into people like my postman listening to my podcast. My postman had didn't know it was me who did the...
What an informed postman.
And he said, he took his earbud out and said, that's you, isn't it? I can't believe that. What synchronicity. But look, voices in terms of news are not important anymore. Personally, but I would say that because I'm an old geezer. I think that's sad. I think it has more meaning. It's more arresting. And in America, they still do the big sound. You go listen to 880 WCBS New York, and it hits you right in the solar plexus every damn time. I got to know a newscaster from ABC, Karen Chase, who to me she is my gold standard, is Karen. And I got to meet Karen at one of these 9/11 things that I did. And we arranged to meet in a Starbucks near Ground Zero. We'd never seen each other before. And I was in awe of her voice and her ability. And, you know, we had a voice admiration club going on. And we spent a day together in the sunshine in New York, walking around the city and talking about our lives and our work. But they still do the voice thing. She has this a voice to die for. It is so good. And apparently she had some infection, I think it was, when she was younger, so it became gruffer.
Wow.
But wow.
Yeah.
Check out Karen Chase.
Okay, I will.
But, you know, she was my hero.
Wow.
And I got to meet her. I also got to meet, more recently, Art Bell.
Wow.
The doyen of the stuff that we do.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
I say to meet on Skype, not to meet in person.
Was Art Bell your main kind of role model for
Without
your
a doubt.
show?
I hope people don't think that I'm a big-headed so-and-so, but I was. I mean, these are facts, and it's not me sort of bigging myself. I don't even bother.
I did have to bring a silk sheet for Howard to sit on during the podcast.
And my personal supply of Evian water. Thank you for that.
And blue M&Ms. But no, you're easygoing, Howard.
I once interviewed a star who insisted, that I can't name this person, sadly, who insisted that before doing an early morning interview, we had to have the champagne on ice.
Wow.
I'm sorry, you were saying...
Well, now that we're just deviating slightly...
Don't you hate it when interviewees, by the way, say to you, what was the question you asked and you've forgotten it?
Well, now you've got me thinking about people. When I went on a tour of BBC in London, they told me, I don't even know if they were supposed to tell me or not, but they told me that Jennifer Lopez had guested on a show there and that she would only guest on the show if they painted the green room white and filled it with white leather furniture just for her to be present in for like half an hour before the show.
Did they do it?
They did, yeah.
That's amazing. No,
Your turn.
I'm wondering if I can name the person because she's no longer with us and she was wonderful. No, I don't think I can. But one day in the book, I will.
Or you'll mouth it to me and I'll just go.
Yeah. But no, I'll write it down.
Can't read your lips out.
While we're talking, as long as
write it down.
As long as you promise me.
I promise I won't say it.
'cause
I might not even know who the person is.
Yes, you will.
Oh yeah, I do.
Yeah. So there. Oh yes, I've got a story for everyone. I've no idea where we are now. We've lost the thread completely.
Your podcast and Art Bell.
Oh yes,
because,
Art Bell.
Well, I just want to say for starters that, I mean, it's almost to me goes without saying, but your podcast is so excellent.
Well, you're very sweet to say that.
It is a gold standard, like high bar of podcasts. Anybody out there who's podcasting, if you haven't heard Howard Hughes, The Unexplained, you've got to check out this podcast. It's mesmerizing. I know so many people who not only listen to it, but one person, which I'm not going to say his name because I asked, can I say his name? And he said no. But this person who's close in my life has suffered very badly with depression and wanted you to know how comforting your podcast has been over the years.
Isn't that kind? You know, it's a funny thing that I hoped, but I never thought would happen. That you reach people on a level that is beyond the words that you're using. And with The Unexplained, somehow I get these emails from people saying that they relate to me, which is kind because I want to be a real person to them. There are so many cardboard people out there. I can't be doing with any of that. So I tell them if I've got any issues, I let them know. And they know that I live on an absolute shoestring. And I ask for donations to the show not because I want to make a pile, but because I have to try and make a living. You know, when you do the things that you want to do, you're not going to get rich.
Right.
Okay. If you are willing to knuckle down and do whatever, then you might get rich if you're lucky. The chances are you might be chucked on the scrap heap before then. If you want to do the things that you want to do and you believe in them, then you're not doing it for money. Right. And if you are, then it's not going to work for you, I think. So people say, I get all sorts of people from mail from people who've been depressed, and I know what that's like. And they've been through difficult health times. I know what that's like. And they've lost their parents. I know what that's like. So I totally relate to them on that level.
Right.
It always gratifies me massively because it's all done in my living room and it's done on a shoestring. And I think I can probably admit this now because I'm about to upgrade. But I wonder if this will kill it. No, I don't think it will.
Are we going to do something that's going to end the popularity of your podcast?
No, but for the purists out there who say, we love your audio quality, I master the show on a mini disc. Right?
Oh, wow.
Because it's easy.
On a mini disc?
Remember mini disc?
Well, barely.
So, you know, you literally have tracks and they're pretty good for not getting computer files you lose. Now, I'm about to go solid state and, you know, completely, but I mastered.
Are you getting a cell phone?
I've actually, in the last 18 months, I actually got a smartphone. I had a Nokia 3310, which they're bringing back. I had a Nokia 3310 and I was proud of it. I can beat anyone texting on a 3310.
You were proud to not have a smartphone.
What you've got to realize is that not everything brand new is best, right? In terms of technology, I've been into sound and what they used to call hi-fi all of my life. My poor father would tell you, I used to drive my parents nuts. So I've been into sound and sound recording and microphones all my life. And a lot of the stuff that they made 30 or 40 years ago sounds better. I mean, look, we're doing this with a microphone called the Shure SM7B.
The secret's out, people.
It's been around for years, and it was made by Shure in America. The current production is made, as it says, Hejo en Mexico, but it's still the same mic.
My mic's made in Mexico?
It's made in Mexico.
Do I have to report that to U.S. Customs?
No, don't tell Mr. Trump, though, because he'll probably seize it and send it back.
Has it come over the wall, my microphone?
Political controversy there, I think you'll find, Howard. That's your impression. No, you look. A lot of that old stuff. For example, this microphone is based on a thing called the Shure SM57, which is related to the SM58. If you don't know what those mics are, have a look at any set of drums on stage and watch what the lead vocalist is using, because it'll be a variant on this microphone. First introduced in 1966. I've just been trying a microphone that was brought out in 66 called the Sennheiser 441. There's nothing to beat it. They keep bringing stuff out. It's not as good.
Wow.
So I have a combination of the latest technology and very, very old stuff. One of the things I use at home is a filmmaker's miniature mixer, a little thing that's got beautiful sounding preamplifiers, they call them. And this thing is probably 40 years old at least.
Wow.
It was used for years by a television company in Wales. And I bought it for a fraction of what it's worth. And it's battered to hell and sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Why would you want to change that?
Yeah, that's right. Well, your sound of your show is fantastic.
Well, there are people who say that I use a bit too much sort of audio processing on it because I want it to sound like American radio.
Screw those people. It's your show.
Yeah. But Art Bell, okay, to bring us back, because we share a birth date. We can talk all around the houses, and people have got to keep up. It's really hard for ordinary people, who are not Geminis, to work out where we're going next.
Right, what is this show about? I'm still working on that, Howard.
I nearly worked with Art Bell, but he retired, sadly, as just before it was all about to happen. I nearly did. He invited me to do a show before him.
Aww.
And I wanted to make it happen, but he wanted me to do it basically from my home on Skype, and I can't do that because I've got neighbors. And I would get complaints if I was speaking loudly at 3 o'clock in the morning. So that was a big thing. And I tried to hire studios and I couldn't afford them. They were all quoting £250 a night. So that delayed everything. The story, I know Art's told part of the story, but this is the story, that I was going to do this show before him. So it was me first, Art Bell, Richard Hoagland, who's now doing his show, which continues. And I couldn't do it. So we got to the stage where I was still desperately trying to make this work because it was my dream. I've been approached twice now by Coast to Coast AM.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Over the years. And, the conversations didn't particularly go anywhere. But, might one of these days, Lisa, if you're listening, I'm still very, very keen.
George Norrie?
I know George. But I can't afford what they call ISDN. Which would allow me to do live from home. They don't do that much Skype on the big networks, but Skype is the coming thing. Voice over IP is where it's going to be at. ISDN is too expensive. I just can't afford it. So that would be the problem, I think, in me doing that. But I would love to fill in on Coast to Coast AM. People keep saying, why don't you?
Yeah.
So, Lisa, I'm still keen. I got 2 phone calls over a period of spread between 5 years from Lisa saying, your listeners have been telling us about you. And we talked not exactly about that, but around that, okay? And I think back then, they thought I was a little up and bright for late night. Of course, I've come down a bit since then. But who knows what may happen? But that's something I'd like to do. So Art Bell offered me this gig, but then he retired because he was having some difficulties. Shots were being fired around his compound.
Oh, my gosh.
In Nevada. And he's not on air regularly now, which I think is a great loss and a shame. For me, he's the gold standard of all of this. He's a little reclusive. He's another Gemini like us.
How old is he now?
Art is about 71 or 2, I think, now. But very youthful, as Geminis tend to be. And, we had a good old talk about stuff. And I enjoyed that. He is very private, very reclusive, but just happens to be a genius at doing what we do. I still listen to the old shows online in awe. And I remember getting my first computer, which I bought through my employer's Capital Radio. I put it on my credit card, and I spent a year paying for it. Wired it up at home with a modem.
Yes.
First thing I heard was a music station in Paris called NRJ. I thought, oh, that's cool. But it sounded a little bit like that. The quality improved. The next thing I heard was this guy talking about stuff that I've been interested in and doing radio about all my life. The aliens and the ghosts and all the rest of it. I want to do that show. So I made it my task to find out about him. And I realized he did the show at home. And I've been interested in home recording all my life. Didn't know very much about it. Have now learned to the point where I'm a bore now. As you've heard, I'm a technology bore now.
Well, I don't think you're not a bore to me. I'm hanging on your every techie word.
Absolute sound bore these days.
I love it.
But Art did the thing from home, and I thought, I want to do that. So let's fast forward to after I left Capital Radio, I joined LBC, big London talk station, which was then owned, is not now owned, by a company called Chrysalis, who wanted to get into the radio business and had been for a little while. And they said to me, we are going to do American radio in London. Come and join us. I couldn't turn that down. I left Chris Tarrant after 10 years and went to that. And when I arrived, I discovered they were doing a copy of BBC 5 Live with the same templates and everything. And they weren't doing American-style talk radio.
Oh.
So that was a little bit of a difficulty. But I worked with a wonderful man called Nick Ferrari, who's still doing breakfast, who was my guide and defender. And in the end, I was there for 2 years. I did breakfast news, morning drive news, had my own show called Howard's World, talking to people in radio around the world, stars like Scott Shannon in America and John Laws in Australia, people no one knows in this country, but they're huge in their own countries. So I did all that sort of stuff, did 9/11 second anniversary for them. And I think they were having difficulties, so they got rid of a whole lot of people. And to my shock, it included me. I can tell the story now. I'm pleased to say it. Nick Ferrari was wonderful to me. He went up to management and said, you have made a mistake. But it didn't help me, and I was out.
That was one of your hits that you've had.
Utterly destroyed by it at the time because I didn't believe such things could happen. And business decisions are business decisions, but only later, not that it will do me any good now, did I find that the chief executive of the company said to a friend of mine who's a senior radio figure, he didn't necessarily agree with what happened to me, but you have to, quote, you have to let managers manage. Well, they managed. And that's how I ended up out of there with nothing to do for the first time in my career. It took me a long time to pick myself up from that. Doesn't hurt anymore. It did for a long, long time. It probably sounds like it does, but it doesn't anymore. But for,
do you need a tissue for those tears?
No, look, it's, I don't know whether I should be. I mean, look, is it the sort of thing that you want to hear me talking about here?
I think the thing is, it's true. It's truth that has happened in your life.
I've told part of the story online, and I put it in when I was writing my life story for a magazine. I wrote about that. But that's what happened to me. It happens to all of us.
Of course it does.
It happens to all of us. But Nick Ferrari was a great defender, and he's a wonderful man. As far he's up in the charts, as far as I'm concerned. To cut a long story very short, Nick helped me to get into TalkSport, which was then run by a man called Kelvin McKenzie. Who is a big media figure in this country. And they said to me, okay, this was 3 weeks after I'd exited LBC. What would you want to do for us if you had one show per week? I said, well, I've got 6 ideas. The one I like the most is this one about aliens and UFOs and all that stuff. You'll hate it. And Kelvin McKenzie said, go and do it. So they let me do it.
So it really was a blessing, which often happens.
Yes. I mean, please don't anybody think that I'm sorry for myself and look how hard done by I was. We're all lucky to be doing this for a living.
That's right.
I could have been stacking shelves in a supermarket. This is a wonderful thing to have done all my life. It was the hardest blow that I've ever faced. It wasn't fair. In the November, they were still getting texts, the producer of Ferrari's show, saying, where's Howard gone? And you're not allowed to say. No one, I just disappeared. And people were saying, oh, was it a contract row? Did he want more money? No, I was just out the door, gone. And I won't be the first and I won't be the last in the industry that we're in. Of course not. So I went to TalkSport and just made it happen every week. And they loved the fact that I would just get on with it and do it every week.
And you're talking about what you wanted to talk about.
Exactly. And they said to me after the first night, it sounds like it's always been on, which is amazing. I was very scared when I did it.
I believe your first podcast aired or went live on the internet May 4th, 2006. So did your radio broadcast come before that, or was the podcast first?
Well, the TalkSport broadcast, I mean, it always sat slightly uneasily with the sport content. It was very different.
So like aliens and sport.
Yeah, exactly. So I was eventually replaced by George Galloway. It was all very good-natured, and they said, you'll come back one day.
And he was a sports guy, I'm assuming.
Well, no, George Galloway, MP.
Oh, he's an MP.
The mother of all talk shows, Tony Blair. Tony Blair, to go have blood on your hands, all that sort of stuff. So he went on and did that. And I left them very amicably. It was a very nice parting. And ironically, the show had just begun to take off when it ended. But we had the idea that they said, you've proved you can do this kind of radio talk format. So, we want you back at some point. And 10 years later, I did go back, and am back. But my listeners started emailing me. The people at TalkSport were great, and I love that place. They linked up my home email to my work email. So I got all the emails from listeners saying, where have you gone?
Oh, that's nice.
And one of them said, turn it into a podcast.
Yeah.
This was 2006. I knew nothing about that. But I went away and did it. Found somebody who'd helped me, and now I've found Adam, my webmaster, who's been helping me for 9 years now. He was a schoolboy in Liverpool, helping out at Radio City in Liverpool when I first met him. He used to go into the radio station in his school uniform and fix all the technical problems that they'd had during the day. He is what we call a genius.
Yeah,
technically is Adam, and Adam is going to be the next Richard Branson without a doubt. But he's been with me on this. So I turned it into a podcast and grew it slowly. First of all, once a month. Now it's kind of 4 times a month. And I found that you can do radio at home.
Yeah.
And you don't need the great panoply of technical gear and all the rest of it. You don't need all the tiers of management and stuff like that. You can just do your stuff. And because I trained as a journalist, I'll do it like a broadcast, governed in the same way.
Well, that's why it comes across as just so professional that I always feel this surprise that I can't believe this is free content, that I'm not paying a subscription for this, which is something you could do and maybe should do.
Well,
you've got so many episodes.
It's difficult because, if I don't find another way of making money in that far off future that neither of us think about, I would retire in poverty. And we don't want that. So I've got to find, I'm being very honest about
very
this.
Transparent on the financial front, I might say. I
think I'm from Liverpool. What is the point of making stuff up? Or, know that in the entertainment business, there are people who big themselves up massively. I can't be dealing with any of that. The fact of the matter is, I do it because I love it. I don't make very much out of it. Some kind people donate to it. Not very many, but they do. And that's massively important to me because it keeps it going. But unless I find other ways professionally of making money, then I don't even want to think about the future.
Why don't you get sponsors for your show?
Well, sponsorship is, if there's anybody who would like to sponsor this.
I would think there would be loads of people who would like to sponsor.
Hang on though, Natalie. Think about the content, right? Do you want to align your business with conspiracy theories and stuff like that and ghosts and stuff? Some companies won't do that. Art Bell was very lucky in that he had a radio communications company. They sell gadgets and cool radios. One of them I bought, and then only realized when it arrived in London that it was 110 volt and I had to buy an adapter for it. The Sea Crane Company sponsored Art Bell. So if they'd like to sponsor me, I would love to feature their stuff. But sponsorship for this kind of thing is difficult. You'll notice that a lot of these people have a year's supply of storable food. For the survivalists, right?
Right.
Or nutritional supplements.
Yes, that's right.
Which are what keep Alex Jones going.
That lasts for 200 years.
Nutri-Excellence and Health. I've been taking this now for 5 years, and I'm 3 inches taller, and I can run 5 times faster and leap tall buildings in a single bound, whatever. They all have a way of making that pay, but it's very hard to get that revenue stream going. And there is a part of me that wants to be true to it all. And keep serving those nice people who say, we love what you do. There are some nice people who say, we think you're the next Art Bell, that kind of stuff, which, I am not worthy, but it's nice when they say it.
It's very logical as well. I can really understand people saying that.
Well, nobody believes it less than I do. I can't believe they're saying our names in the same breath. He said it. He said in a conversation that we had, and I don't think I'm breaking a confidence, that he saw me as a potential successor, which is a lovely, lovely thing. Yeah. I mean, I think there are other much better people out there, but how nice of him to say this about a Brit he didn't even know. So that's where we're at. I'm very keen to take it all forward, and I have to find ways of doing that. But I have to be true to the lovely people who support me and understand that this is where I am and this is who I am. And I need to do it for them too. So how do we do that? I have no idea. If you've got any ideas, let me know.
I will put my thinking cap on for you. I will. Well, you're up to 289 episodes. And
290 is going on this weekend.
290 is going on this weekend. It was actually your podcast was one of the ones making me feel bad about myself because I have not been terribly regular with my uploads, and I've had 2 gaps for pretty serious reasons. One most recently, which I don't mind talking about because I was going to talk about it. My aunt was diagnosed with a terminal illness.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And my mum had been on this journey. My mum and dad and all of her family, of course, had been on the journey with her already for about 3.5 years. And back in October, my mum said, I would never ask you if I didn't really need you. I need you now. So I went back in October and ended up then, I had to do some work back in the UK. And then I went back before Christmas and I literally put my whole life on hold. And I just was so focused on her care and helping her be well and do everything I possibly could, alternative healing things to help extend her life and give her hope, which to much degree, I would say, were successful, those things.
And do you know what that would have meant to her?
Well, I think it did mean an awful lot to her and an awful lot to her family. And now, I've got a huge gap in my show and I'm just really starting to put my own life back together.
Well, if I can give, I don't know whether can I give you a bit of advice?
Go for it.
Look, based on my experience where I've been through the loss of my mother, the loss of my father, I had a hearing problem. I got a virus that left me with ringing in the ears, which I still have.
Remember that.
And that took me down for a while and meant I didn't work that much for a year. That's quite recently. I was working for Global Radio in Leicester Square then. That's the people who now run Capital. And I had to stop. I stopped everything because I was losing my hearing. I mean, it's okay now, touch wood, it's great. The only thing you can do is to tell people honestly. And anybody who can't accept that, you don't want listening. Most people understand. And I've had to learn the hard way in life that what counts are people. The people in your life, your friends, your family. There was a time when I was so career-driven that the people, they didn't take a back seat because I always cared. Of course I did. But they didn't take as much of my time as they deserved. So my advice to anybody doing this is, it's great to be doing this, and it's much better than working. Of course it is. But your family, those who love you, are much more important than anything else. And there will be people who will be amazed to hear me verbalizing this now. But, along the way, I've made some bad personal decisions, relationships, stuff like that, people I've left behind along the way. And I now realize that those things are much more important than your career or the place you happen to be or the fact that you've got 2.5 million people listening. It's an illusion. The material achievements, the awards that I had around my flat that I've now put in my garage, most of them, it's lovely to have them, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day. Why? Because we're all on the same road. At the end of the day, we're all going to die. And whether we've made £1 million, £20 million, or £5, that's going to be the end of the story. So you better do as much good as you can, which makes me sound pious and awful. It's not what, do as much good as you can while you're here.
Yeah, no, I agree with you
what
completely.
I think.
Well, when I was researching, curious how many shows you'd done, I'd been really beating myself up because the longer this gap has been with my podcast, of course, I'm burdened with guilt that I'm letting people down, and I'd receive letters, really sweet letters from listeners going, we miss you. And, it was very comforting to hear your show, and I'm really missing that, and I felt very guilty.
Did you could have, on any portable recorder, when I've done this, you just go and record. I know you're emailing and I know you want to know where I am.
Yeah.
Here's what's going on.
Yeah, I should.
2 minutes.
You know what? A weak point with me is, Howard, I'm very much a perfectionist when it comes to these. And I have to listen through them for any kind of glitches in audio. I'm so particular.
That came across in some of your emails, and you're such a natural at this that you don't have to worry so much about the fine points. And at the end of the day, the fine points don't really matter. It's the words that, as we say in Liverpool, it's what comes out of your gob and who you are and what you are. That's much more important than any silly little technical points. No one cares. Although I'm a perfectionist about sound, at the end of the day, don't worry about that. If you record something on a portable recorder saying, here's why I'm not here,
Right.
your listener will understand.
Right. Reflecting on it, I should have done that, and it did cross my mind, but I didn't do it because I didn't know what date to tell people, because I didn't know. We didn't know how long the journey was going to be.
Open-ended.
Yeah.
When I was having my hospital, affairs recently, I just explained at the beginning of the podcast, there may not be as many shows. There's a health issue that I'm dealing with here. And I was very, very worried.
Right.
And a lot of the time, although I've broadcast in every state, sleep deprived, emotionally drained, wrecked, and on top of the world, really happy. But I found it difficult to do shows when I was so worried.
Yeah.
So I explained, and they accepted, and all they do now is say, how are you?
Yeah. And how are you?
And here I am. So I'm okay.
It's positive.
I'm getting there. It's all positive.
Good. Well, it gave me a little bit of a reprieve when I went backwards in your catalog of 289 episodes, because I thought somehow I was thinking, oh gosh, has he been on every week? But then when I got back to the original year, I found, he just did a handful the first year and a handful the second year. And you really got going and built massive steam around 2010 was when it was really clocking up tons of regularity.
It was hard at the beginning, it was hard to fit in. When I was doing the Talk Sport show, I was so determined after my LBC experience to work as much as I could in as many different places as I could. So I'd spread my risk. I was never going to be caught out like that again, I thought. But I was working 6.5 days a week at one point. So it was hard to do podcasts. There was a point when I was doing so much stuff. I was very lucky to be offered things. I was doing television voiceovers all the time. I was one of the voices of ITV entertainment shows.
So was Jason over here. So was the voice of ITV.
You know how that is. It's great, but the staffing changes and stuff like that. And I was first of all taken on at the very end days of London Weekend LWT Productions, which is just at the very end before it became ITV PLC. So we're talking about the 2000s, early 2000s. I did all sorts of stuff. I did the British Comedy Awards live for 8 years. You'd have to wear a dinner jacket even if you weren't seen. Oh. And it was a marvelous thing to do. I couldn't believe they'd asked me, because I'm not I'm a journalist, not a voiceover actor. But they asked me to do it because I could do live. And you know what? They trusted me with writing my own notes.
Wow.
And I just wrote notes in a pyramid with facts about whoever was going up. And then the technique of the thing is, as they're going up to receive their award, you have to talk for as many seconds or minutes if they're shaking hands with all their friends at tables on the way. And then you have to close your mouth at an appropriate point the moment they open theirs to say, thank you for my award. It's a skill.
It is a skill.
I have no idea how I was able to do it. But you know what? In 8 years, I never failed. Live.
Wow.
I've no idea how I was. It wasn't me doing it. Something was with me. I used to sort of pray to all my, dead relatives, please help me through this. Because I was so scared at the beginning. And I'd always get through the beginning part, which is the countdown, titles, and ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jonathan Ross. And I'd be nervous for that, because if you screw that up, you've ruined the whole show live at a peak audience of 13, 14 million people. It doesn't have that audience these days, but it did then. And then I'd relax into it. And sometimes I'd be doing it and I'd think I was watching a funny television program. I'd be laughing and then I'd think, hang on, I'm on this show. So they would trust me with two things. I'd make my own notes up and I would deliver them my way. And also they would, three things. They'd tell me who the winners were beforehand.
Oh.
And they would know that I wouldn't phone the press and tell them.
Right, which is,
so they
an
hour before the show, they would tell me who'd won.
Wow.
So that was a marvelous experience. And there was a man called Michael Hurl, who was the doyen of British entertainment TV. He was Cilla Black's producer for years. Michael Hurl Productions was the TV company that made the Comedy Awards for ITV. He was a Top of the Pops producer for years. The man was wonderful. And he was quite old when I first met him. And I was employed, first of all, to do the voiceover on Cilla's Moment of Truth. And I auditioned with about 6 other voice actors. And I did it for a laugh because I thought they're never going to use me because I'm a guy who reads the news. And they picked me. And at the end of the first series, he said, Howard, have you done much television? I said, none, Michael. This is my first. He said, you'll do more. And I did.
Oh, well, that's
So
nice.
I really missed the television. I missed the TV voiceovers because they're an art. If they ask you to shave a second off a thing, for some reason, I never understood how I could do it, but I could.
Now, did you never want to be on air? Or like on camera, sorry?
As I've got older, I want to do it.
Yeah.
But when I was younger, I was too shy.
I could see you totally doing a show on camera.
And I once auditioned. An old girlfriend of mine was a TV news reader, and she got me in some downtime with the techs at the TV station to do a little audition. It was terrible.
I see.
I caught the engineers watching. It was 20 years ago. I was much younger.
Right.
But I was a radio guy. So my earpiece, the wire, was at a 45-degree angle to my shoulder. It looked stupid. It was like broadcast news. Remember the film called where the newsreader guy has to fill in who never does it?
Yes.
And he's in a panic sweat. I was a bit like that. But what they never told me, and I now realize what you do, you never look straight into the camera all the time because it's threatening. When you start, you do this. You look from left to right and you bring your eyes up from the desk. That's when you see announcers on television in the old days of in-vision continuity. David Hamilton was my great hero back in the day, so a long time ago. But he would always look up from the desk and say, hello again, tonight on Thames. And then when he was going to whatever item it was, he would look at some point on the floor or the monitor as he finished. I didn't do this. When I did that audition, I finished reading the news and then I sat staring like something from a Jack Nicholson movie into the camera. It was terrible. Now I think I could do it. I did a pilot show years ago for a thing called Predictions. And there was a guy, I've forgotten his name now. He was a former London weekend producer. He said, Irish guy, he said, Howard, you've got a fantastic profile. A great profile, a fantastic profile, especially from the left. He said, you're going to be great. And so we did this remarkable thing in an old warehouse. And there were all these moonlighting BBC employees, camera people, makeup people, everything there. And we had a guy from the Far East called Mr. West in. Mr. West, don't know anything about him, but I was in communication with him for a couple of years after that. He was the predictions guy. And they brought him in on a trolley, sideways, with lots of dry ice, so it looked as if he was floating onto set.
Okay.
At the end of it, though, I was pretty nervous. I forgot about the crew, and I was just looking at the camera. And I thought, I'd love to do this. I never did, and now is the time at this advanced age. I'd love to.
I mean, the thing is, even with your podcast, you could make it a video.
I could make it into a video podcast.
Yeah, very easily, couldn't you?
Well, there's a thing about radio that's intimate, though. I don't know whether I mean, the cameras are increasingly coming into radio studios, as you will know. So on the talk radio show that I'm doing now, there's a camera there. I don't think it's activated, but it will be. When I first started doing the Talk Sports show, Kelvin McKenzie brought in a thing called Talk Sport TV. It had a Sky Channel number, and all the shows were on television. So that was quite interesting. I was, I had the tarot reader in and I'd be showing the cards to the camera and that sort of stuff. So I started getting a taste for it. TalkSport TV only lasted, I think, 2 months or so. But it was interesting. So I'd like to do I did an audition last year for some people in Los Angeles who said they were developing a concept. And, we think you'd be a great host for this, Howard. So I did the audition. It was the most bizarre thing. I never heard from them again on Skype.
That's very typical.
You're our preferred, Howard. You're our preferred candidate for this, though. You are, and it may still be going through. Who knows? I have no idea. But I heard one email after that and no more. But I did the audition in my kitchen.
I mean, that is a very typical thing of LA. You have no idea how many times with projects I've been in meetings with people in LA and they shake your hand and say, we're going to do this. This is exciting.
Howard, I love your work.
Yeah. And then literally you hear nothing, or variations of it where you'll get a call from your agent and they'll be like, well done in the meeting. They want your show. They want worldwide rights. And then paperwork gets done, but then it stops and just everything grinds to a halt.
Well, here's news for you, Natalie. Your time is coming.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you.
Okay, it's on the way now, but it's coming. You watch this happen.
We should do a show called June 10th. Now,
we've given it away now.
See, I'm super curious now. What if we were born in the same year?
No, we're not going down that avenue,
What
Natalie,
if you
because
wrote
we were.
Write it on a piece of paper,
No,
and I'll never
even,
say.
I'm not even going to do that. It's going to be enigmatic. It is going to be something.
But we could have been born in the same year.
Well, well, no, it's highly unlikely, Natalie, and you know this. Come on, look into my eyes.
You're
a
very youthful guy. You've got no freckles on your face. I've got more freckles than you.
Yes, but they're all on the back of my hand.
I've got those too. Come on.
They're called. My grandmother used to call them age spots. No, I never go there. But you know,
all right, fine.
It's just. I believe. You see, look. Age. One of my old bosses used to say, "Oh, Howard, you know that 50 is the new 30." He used to say when he was 50.
Yeah, I'm going to say that too, just so you know.
Well, no, and I think it's true. If you acknowledge the number, then it becomes a fact. I just don't. Here at the BBC, they don't know my age. I don't tell them because a lot of my colleagues are in their 20s and I want to get on with them. I don't want them thinking I'm some old geezer.
Right.
I'm not ready to be an old geezer.
Right.
The problem with radio is that they pigeonhole you. So some radio station groups have put me in the pigeonhole in the category of heritage. I don't.
Oh my God.
Listen, I have news for them.
Jesus Christ.
I don't ever, ever, ever want to be heritage.
Heritage?
If I've got to be, the truth of it is, if I've got to be heritage, I don't want to do it anymore.
Oh my God.
You know, I can't, you cannot box people up like that. Some people do old and are old, and some people just aren't. And I want to be one of those people.
Yeah, you're a buoyant, youthful person.
Yeah,
definitely.
You know, there's an Italian restaurant in Teddington, and the guy there is the mistaken impression that I look like Richard Gere. So this guy says, whenever I go in there, he says, Richard Gere is here. Look, it's Richard Gere. Richard Gere is here. You're going to have your usual, sir. You're going to have the veal, maybe, sir, or you're going to have the chicken today. No, Richard Gere is here. So we try and stay and think young. It's a Gemini thing, and you will know what that's about, being a fellow Gemini.
I mean,
my other friend is somebody you may know, Caroline Faraday. Do you know Caroline?
I don't actually, but
in LA, well, there, Jason knows Caroline. We were at Capitol together, and she was 17, I think, when she started. Her birth date's very near to ours, and whenever Caroline and I get together, we can talk and talk and talk. The three of us worked together on Capitol: Neil Fox, her, and me. And when Chris Tarrant was away, we'd be the breakfast show. And the three of us got on like a house on fire because we knew what we were talking about, even if nobody else did.
Right. Well, I know what I want to talk about. It's more about your podcast.
Okay.
So I love the list on your website, theunexplained.tv. I guess .com was taken.
Trademarked.
That's pretty incredible that you could trademark The Unexplained, because you would think that would be a term.
No, it is a trademarkable thing. I mean, I've been through it all with the Intellectual Property Office in Newport, so I own The Unexplained.
That's
brilliant. The title of the show on Talk Radio is mine.
Am I infringing something now, saying
not
The
at all.
Unexplained?
Not at all. I mean, look, it's The Unexplained is a phrase, but as a commodity that's a podcast, it's just because I was advised to do it.
Do you know what, though? I think there are other podcasts that have called themselves The Unexplained.
Well, there are some that are similar, and some of them may be, what can I say? Some of them may be, my listeners point out to me that some of them may be infringing my trademark.
Yeah, I think so. Well, for people listening, Howard's podcast, The Only Unexplained, you should be checking out, has a big U. It's the only graphic artwork with a big white U on it.
Well, this is all thanks to Adam, my web guy, who knows about these things.
Adam getting another shout out here.
It's can only be trademarked in the UK. You cannot. No one can have a worldwide trademark.
No, you'd have to file in every country.
You'd have to file in every country, and I don't even know whether you'd have to be based there. But in terms of the United Kingdom, I have the trademark. And it was only because Adam, my web guy, said he's very business-minded, which I'm not.
I think
you need to trademark.
I think you wouldn't get the trademark, The Unexplained, in America because it's already been taken by the Democrats.
Yeah. Well, there are those who may claim that. Oh, dear. You want to have Hillary on your show, by the way. Why didn't you get Hillary on? She's available now.
I think I'd rather have Amy Poehler on my show.
No, look, she has time these days.
I'm not a political person, so I would be no good with a political guest. I'd probably do better with Donald Trump, who has a television background that I'd be able to relate to doing television, you know.
He's well connected. It could be very, very good for your career.
You know, I have a connection to Donald Trump, is that I was a shoe designer for many years while I was a stand-up comic. I was the first ever shoe designer for Playboy. And I started around 2000.
They have their own shoes. Well, look, we could have done a whole half hour on this.
No, I was literally designing branded footwear for Playboy. And, it was one of these strange jobs you get into because I'm an artist and I'm self-taught. I can just draw. And when people ask me to draw things, I can kind of draw anything. So I was hired to design shoes. But I was a stand-up comedian and I had the world's coolest boss, Frank, who I adored and still adore. And he would let me go on the road doing stand-up. And he was like, kid, your shoes are selling. Just go do your thing, make them laugh, and just send your shoes.
Do your stuff and come back here and do shoes, okay?
Yes, and he had that kind of approach, and he literally was, talk about somebody who should have been in entertainment. He would do the sales in Vegas of the shoes, and he'd put all the Playboy footwear on the table, and he'd be like talking to high-end department stores in America. And he's just like, so here they are. These are our new designs. Let's face it, they're not going to be on that long.
You do that really well. You see, you are only using, here's my psychic side coming out. You're only using 15% of your capabilities, I feel. There's so much more that you can do.
Ooh.
But like I say, you watch the next. I've got a friend called Christian Dion, and he's you've got to meet him. He's in Los Angeles. Go and see him in Los Angeles. He is originally from Blackpool. And he's, talks like you're going to be through, your life has been bloody terrible lately. I've got to stop him from swearing on the radio, but he always fills up the switchboard when he comes on. I've known him for 3 decades, okay? You've been through a long, dark tunnel. It's been bloody terrible, Christian is I've lost my thread now, isn't that terrible?
15% of my capability.
15% of your capabilities. Christian would say things like, the next 3 months for you are going to be amazing. I'm here to tell you that the next 3 months for you are going to be amazing. I don't know why I feel that, but come back and tell me. I used to do these things that would stop people dead on outside broadcasts I did for Capital. We'd have listeners with us in Monaco or wherever it might be, competition winners, and I'd get talking to them. And one in particular was a woman. I think she was looking for a partner, a husband, whatever. And I said, you will be married, and within a year you'll be happily married, and you'll be living in a house that has a door like this. And I described the door. How did I know this stuff? She emailed me a year later and said, it all happened. Is that scary or what?
Well,
it's not a surprise to you because you can do it, can't you?
I have done in the past. I have done. Now I have to very quickly finish my Trump thread. Else people will be like, how is she involved in Trump? So one of my shoe design jobs was designing the Miss America footwear line, which is Donald Trump's brand, Miss America, which whether he's allowed to keep it or not. So I was in charge of all of the branded footwear for the Miss America. So that's my one very non-political connection to Donald Trump. So back to your show and you being psychic, which
your story is much more interesting.
Oh, I beg to differ, Howard.
Did you ever meet him?
No, I didn't. But I did meet Hugh Hefner several times, and he was so delightful. Just so delightful and truly a gentleman. And he's so loyal to the girls who are his playmates at the Playboy Mansion, because he really does have playmates that live at the mansion. It's quite something. And I became friends with those girls because I worked with Playboy for so long. In fact, I inspired one of them to become a stand-up comedian.
Really?
And she calls herself the Funny Bunny.
That's excellent. The Funny Bunny.
Yeah.
And is she allowed to use the trademark symbol?
No. Okay. Nobody would be allowed to use that.
It's all trademarks. You see, it's all allowed to trademark.
And I know a lot about that trademark because we used to get our shoes in from China. And when you try and get that classic bunny symbol, and it is 68 degrees from the crux of the bow tie to the certain ear.
I wonder what you were going to say there.
Well, maybe that's what inspired it.
68 degrees. Okay.
We would. That's impressive, Howard.
Well,
I've only ever seen 65.
Well, no, there are those who might say that. Have I gone red?
Well, I introduced my show with an explicit rating, so you can actually say anything you want on the show.
Really? Can I say bum?
You can say everything beginning with every letter.
Okay.
Yes.
When people you interview, I mean, because I've worked in mainstream broadcasting, right? I'm always self-censoring, but I'm always censoring the guest. So we've always got to be careful about legality and, the words. I think there are 7 in America that you can't say. But, there are various things that you cannot say. But do you get people on here who will use those words?
Well, yes, because I've interviewed a lot of comedians. Okay. And with comedians, the F word, for example, is such a constant part of the vocabulary. Not for all comics. And I have no problem with it and no judgment of it either. But that's why I wanted to set the precedent when I first did the show, was like, you can say anything you want. And then I almost became disappointed because people weren't swearing. And I envisioned that I was going to be this like British girl with this edgy podcast and people would be effing and blinding away. And then people were so polite on the show. So I've actually changed the rating now to just parental guidance, but for
PG.
Yeah, I'm PG. And
the show is PG.
And I checked with iTunes as well. I was like, I want people to be able to swear. I just want people to be super comfortable on the show. And if they want to swear, they can. And if I want to swear, I can, because I do sometimes. And they said, as long as you've got a parental guidance, it's okay. So
I wonder if I can tell you this. My colleagues know this story because I tell it all the time.
Are you going to swear? Is that hard for you because you're such a pro broadcaster? Would that break a fiber in your soul?
You're originally from Birmingham. There's a word in Birmingham that's not rude because sometimes it's used as a term of endearment in the Midlands. But down here in London, it's seen as more swearing. So, I mean, you can bleep it if you want.
What does it begin with?
T. It's like twit, but with another letter in it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not that bad, is it?
That's like such a harmless word.
Even the prime ministers, former prime ministers use that word.
Aren't they referred to as that word?
I'll tell you a Chris Tarrant story, okay? I haven't told it on air, but I've told all my colleagues this, and it's so funny. He was so good to work with and so funny. I can't tell you who the clip was in the news that I played.
Is this where you write something down for me?
Yeah, I will. I'll write this down, okay? But I played a clip of this person, okay, on the news, at the end of the news, okay?
All right.
And I buzzed through on the talkback system while it was playing to Chris Tarrant and said, listen to him, what a twat. Right? And then, I've used the word now. And so after the news, Chris said, so, Harry, what do you think of this person? And I said, I'm sure he's a very nice man. He said, you've just called him a twat. This was on the radio. I mean, you couldn't do that.
But how did you not know that you just called him that?
No. He wanted to let the world know that he said, so what do you think?
Off the radio, got it.
Yeah, this was on air. He said, what do you think of this person?
So he totally dropped you in it?
No, he didn't drop me in it. It was funny. It was territory that we'd never been to before. He said, so what do you think of this person? And I said, I'm sure he's a very nice man. I'm sure he's got lots of friends. He said, you just called him a twat. And then he played a record. Because he'd worked in Birmingham and didn't think that that was a bad word. I'm just wondering if no, he's going into the... We're in the boss's office here at BBC Radio Berkshire in Caversham.
Not that twat! Sorry.
Excuse me? Number one, you've never met him. He's a lovely man. And number two, we can't possibly use words like that in the boss's office here. Please. So anyway, this person, I don't think I've named him, have I? Because we'd all be in trouble if I did. I don't think we would.
Is that word you've written on the paper? That's...
Well, no. Look, I've written down the name. And, you cannot but agree.
I actually don't know that person. Because remember, I've been out of the UK for a long time.
Okay. All right. Let me write down who this person was and what this person was. Okay.
This must be an interesting time for you listeners now.
No, it's okay. It's all right. I mean, the psychic ones will know anyway.
Sometimes I felt excluded in my life also.
Okay, that's all right. That's all right. We do inclusivity here.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that's an important person.
Check them out online.
Okay.
But anyway, God, I wish I hadn't told the story now.
I'll just say twat again while you get back on track.
Okay, well, that's the worst. That's the harshest word you're going to... Every so often, if something really awful goes wrong, and like rudeness I can't take. So if somebody comes on the phone and is rude to me, I'll put the phone down and I'll say, what the was that? And they can't believe that me and my voice use that word.
Do you do it on the show, on your podcast?
No.
Do you swear ever?
No, I have very, very firm rules for...
You have guidelines.
Well, no, I don't have guidelines because that sounds like bureaucracy. But I just try and do it in the way that I would do a radio show.
Right.
And in commercial radio, we have the dump, right? You know about that, the 7-second delay. Profanity delay.
Right.
Some stations call it dump, some stations call it prof.
Like on Saturday Night Live.
For profanity delay. Right. I mean, I remember being at university, and Radio City in Liverpool paid for me to go on a great journalism course in Cardiff. Thank you, Radio City. Long time ago. But one of the things we had to do was a TV fortnight as part of our course. And apparently in the previous year, one guy thought it was a good idea just to sit in front of the camera for a very long time saying the F word continuously until they pulled him off the air.
So that would be tricky.
It would be.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're trying to take me down a road I don't want to go down, aren't you?
Am I
This man you've heard reading the news is now going to say a naughty word. You're not going to get there.
I wouldn't do anything like that. Gosh, what is a word that rhymes with duck? But...
I have no idea. Truck.
Okay, I'm going
in my book, it's either luck or truck or muck.
Enough of this trying to make you swear.
Yes, no, we can't be having that.
With your show, did you ever have, before you started The Unexplained, talk about a segue from that to this, but did you have a paranormal experience that made you think, I'm going to explore this?
Oh, many.
Well, what sort of paranormal experiences did you have in your personal life, and when did they start?
Knowing things were going to happen. I remember, there are so many, but I worked in Worcester. I had an interesting time in radio because I started at Radio City in Liverpool, and I wanted to play records on the radio. And I was a news person, and I was always frustrated. I wanted to be a DJ. So I moved for a lot less money to the BBC in Brighton, very, very young, and did a bit of that. And found out, it's all that glistens is not necessarily gold, But it was a lovely period to be a young guy in Brighton who what's not to like? It was marvelous, great year. But I've lost my thread again. That's that because I was up at 3:30. Paranormal experiences. In Brighton, I remember being in the radio station about to put it on air, which is what I did here this morning. You have to opt out of the network and go local and live. So I was about to opt out of Radio 2. And the man was giving, it was a very peculiar, like religious message or morning talk. Never heard anything quite like it. And as he said, there are more things in heaven and earth than we will ever understand. The clock in front of me exploded, jumped off the wall, and every clock in the building stopped. Now, I'd applied for another job in Nottingham, which turned out to be a disaster for me back then, because I'd come from jolly old Brighton and I was going up to Nottingham where things were not quite the same. It was more than difficult. It was terrible. And I was very young and I didn't handle it well or diplomatically. But I ended up leaving the Nottingham job. But I believe that was some kind of sign telling me not to do this thing. And I'd got massive cold feet. I wanted to go to the boss in Brighton called Bob Gunnell. And I wanted to say, Bob, I don't want to go. And I couldn't. I was very young and my pride wouldn't let me go and say I made a mistake. So I went to Nottingham. It was a disaster. And I knew it was going to be a disaster before I even went there and ended up not working. So I ended up going to Dublin and working on pirate radio for a while, which was cool for a guy called Chris Carey, Radio Nova, 50,000 watt powerhouse American-style radio station with American jingles, did a bit of that. And then ended up working at Radio Wyvern in Worcester, which got me back into massively on track to everything I later came to do. It was run by a wonderful man called Norman Bilton. What a character. I loved Norman. He was great. Norman always drove a Ford Capri. It was it was his symbol. And on Sundays, Norman he insisted on being called Mr. Bilton. In the media, everybody's Harry, Norman, Fred, whether he's the boss or not. He was Mr. Bilton. So I called him Mr. Bilton or boss to get round it. Every Sunday, he would come in to inspect the radio station wearing a pullover and a shirt with the collar turned up and no tie. That was every Sunday. He was a remarkable man, but I got this gig and I needed to get back into UK mainstream radio. So I needed the gig. I told him, give me 5 days, I'll prove to you I can do this. So he was in need, let's say he was in need of a newsroom at that time. So I was hired to do news. And I visualized him saying to somebody, I'm really pleased we hired Howard. He's going to be such an asset to us. The next day, the man who later became my friend Sam, who was effectively running the station day to day, Sammy came down and said, you must be doing all right. Norman's just said, I'm really pleased that we hired Howard. He's going to be a great asset to the radio station. Precognition or what?
When you say you visualized, did you do that consciously, or was it more like you were observing your own mind's eye?
My sister had been doing a thing called Silva mind control that you need to explore on this show, I think.
Wow.
It is a technique invented by a Mexican TV engineer called Jose Silva. And I'm not here to advocate it. I don't know. But my sister did the course at great expense. I just read the book.
Wow.
And she always got a bit peed off with me because, I can say pissed off, can't I? You said I can. Because, say, look at that. God,
it just feels so much disappointment, though, that you just said that.
God, that feels so good. So she was always a bit peed off with me because she did the course and it never worked as well for her as it did for me, and I'd only read the book. So it's all about sort of visualizing what you want. I think that's dangerous, actually, to tell you the truth. Because life and the universe, I believe, is a balance. And if you program for great riches and all the things that you ever wanted, there's always a price to pay. As Christian Dion, my psychic friend in Los Angeles, who you must meet when you're there, always says, there's always a price to pay. You know, Christian said to me when I was 21, I think, and I first met him and interviewed him, and I was pretending to be Mr. Media. He didn't know the insecurities and all the rest of it that was within. Or I hadn't told him, but he came out with all of that stuff when he did a reading for me. Everything. And he said to me, in this life, you will have success, but there's always a price to pay. And the price that you will pay is in your personal life. Your personal life, he said. And for a while, he was absolutely right, which comes back to themes that we explored at the beginning of this. He predicted that I would go to London. 7 years elapsed. I lost contact with him. I arrived in London to read the first independent radio news bulletin that a great man called Douglas Cameron hadn't read across the nation. In those days, you had to read the news from London into a talk show that was going out in London, but the rest of the nation would pick up the national news. There'd be a gap of a second at the top of the hour.
Wow.
They'd opt in and then opt out. Independent radio news. I was scared. I looked across the desk in that studio and I thought, who's that opposite? We've got our psychic hour next, says the presenter, Pete Murray. He looks at me just as I'm about to go on air for the first time live to the nation and says, I told you so. It was Christian, guest on that show 7 years later. He also said, America will be very big for you. You're going to America. Years later, I went to America and got to know America. For a time, I knew America really well. I used to arrive in New York it's very similar to Liverpool. And in fact, a lot of my distant relatives lived there in the Depression years as illegals from Liverpool. That's another story to tell. But, you know, I got to know America really well and I miss it like hell. If I could be anywhere, I'd be there. That's the truth.
You can come visit me.
I'll come say hi. I'll come say hi.
We'll take you around.
But, you know, I'm the American thing I never really did, although it's nice to know that the biggest percentage of my listening is in America and Canada. I'm talking about the podcast.
Right. So you had this precognitive experience. And what about things like UFOs? I mean, have you ever seen any unidentified flying objects?
No. 17 years of age, though, I mean, who knows? But I looked at my bedroom door, which was open, and a thin stick. You're going to think I'm nuts, aren't you?
No, I won't.
A sort of cream-colored thin stick skeleton-like creature with long fingers.
And it wasn't Victoria Beckham.
And it wasn't Victoria, strangely enough, on this occasion. I can't talk about my personal life. We said we wouldn't. Darted back from the doorway. And I swear that happened.
Yeah, I believe you, but it sounds frightening.
But no, it sounds absolutely nuts. That's what it sounds. But it happened. I've seen a ghost. I was working at the Radio City Tower in Liverpool just about 4 years ago, filling in for Pete Price. And it's a 3-hour show, late night talk. And I went to the loo, as you have to, the toilet. Came back, and as I was opening the studio door, there was a little man in a flat cap who disappeared in front of my eyes.
Wow.
And I said to Jonathan, the producer, there were only 2 of us in the building. It was midnight. I said, I've just seen a little man. He said, you've seen him, have you? There's a ghost there, and I've seen him. So I've seen a ghost. So do I believe? I want to believe, right? I'm not saying I do believe in all of this, but I'm open-minded, which is how you have to be. Look, there are loads of podcasts out there, and many of them are what I call gee whiz shows. Gee, really? He had 3 heads? That's amazing. More from the man who saw a creature with 3 heads right after this.
Right. Yes, there are different strata of the conspiracy theorists, I think.
I think so. But look, I'm just doing the stuff I do because it's fun.
I just wanted to read you this exact sentence because you know a little bit about how I came to find your podcast is that I had a very remarkable experience in 2012, February 23rd, 2012, which plunged me into research in realms I had never had any interest in or any knowledge of, science and quantum physics. And the best way I think to describe what happened to me was a near-death experience. And it is part of the origins of the podcast. But of course, given that I was working as a stand-up comic, I've got sort of people like Anthony Peake on the show along with Des O'Connor. So it's
and I suppose being a comedian, you know, you're going to be, no matter how good you are, you're going to be used to dying occasionally. So you'll be well familiar with.
Definitely used to dying. So here I kept a diary after this happened. Basically, my blood pressure crashed.
Crikey.
And I went icy, icy, icy cold. Thank goodness I had 2 witnesses, as I never would be able to tell anybody about it. And I started to speak scientific information. No scientific background, and I'm talking real quantum physics-y type stuff. And I was terrified during the experience that I was going to forget the information. So I kept turning over my shoulder to the 2 people in the room with me and saying, please remember everything I'm saying because I'm worried I'll forget. I didn't know what was going to happen. When I looked in front of me, my reality, this reality disappeared. So the whole everything is an illusion is now one of my phrases I research constantly. And anybody who's speaking of those matters, I try and research what they're up to. I saw an infinite grid of energy balls in front of me, literally like a matrix, but I could turn over my shoulder and see this reality and the people sitting in the room.
And what did you believe that was?
I still to this day don't know what that grid was, but I know how I felt in it. I couldn't see my body, so I just became a point of awareness in this grid, just like being in outer space, all set against black. And it was this flawless lattice, which even at the time felt that there was so much precision that it was like software. That it had to have been generated somehow by a computer. That was sort of the feeling because it was so precise.
All right. And had you watched movies that featured like The Matrix? Have you watched movies like that?
But they weren't my kind of movies. This wasn't something that I was into. I was into like Wayne's World and comedy movies.
Now, in the meantime, on this side of existence, were they calling the ambulance for you?
No, because I've had low blood pressure my whole life, and my partner who was with me, I'd already fainted 2 times since he knew me. So this wasn't highly abnormal that I would lose consciousness. What was different in this was that I had kind of fainted, except I was still conscious, and now I was speaking. And I'm sure other than the fact they tell me that I went a deathly white, the fact that I was talking in a normal voice, I don't think anybody feared for my life. And
so for you, that rather like, I mean, look, we'll keep the parallels just to this level, but rather like David Icke says that he had an experience in South America that made him believe the things that he now believes and look at the world in the way. This was your David Icke moment?
I guess it was. And I had never heard of David Icke. I hadn't heard of many people that I now have heard of. And I started to write. After the experience, one of the bizarre things was I was blowing out electrical items, just my presence, light bulbs, phones, hard drives, everything was breaking right after the experience for about 5 days. And I was psychic for about 5 months until I came back from America to England. I was full on psychic. People could ask me questions and I would see floaty images and be able to answer questions. So when you say about the psychic ability, I don't feel I have it now, but I've definitely had it and known what it feels like. And in this diary, which is now about 20,000 words, I just wanted to read you this short entry. So it was November 17th, 2012. My brother put me in touch with this podcast, Howard Hughes, The Unexplained. Listen to Anthony Peake talk about near-death experiences and Philip K. Dick. Immediately wanted to meet Philip K. Dick, but unfortunately he died in 1982. But apparently he believed that everything was an energy grid. Hello, have written to Peake via his site, which I found via Twitter. And now Anthony Peake has been on my show 2 times and is awesome. But that's, so this web, it was like this Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole of trying to find people, because the grid was a key element of the experience. I'm still trying to find out what that grid was. And I've had some really pretty high-end expert people give their opinions. It led me to crystals, which have that flawless molecular structure. So what did I see? Some sort of literally like an atomic microscope expansion of a crystal. Who knows?
Somebody may have been trying to tell you something, I think. Maybe somebody wanted you to understand that what we see and what is here is only a tiny part of the story, and in fact may not even be part of the story at all. Maybe this is just some form of elaborate illusion. Sometimes I think it is, because there are too many coincidences, certainly in my life, for it all to be random. Why am I still, I mean, there are lots of people who ask, probably my listeners this morning on this radio show will have asked, why am I still doing this? How am I still doing this? How do I keep changing? How do I keep finding another path? Another way? What is it that something wants me to do? None of this is random. I don't believe any of this has been random, because if it was all random, I would have fallen by the wayside so many times. And I'm still here. And I'm still doing it. And it's not me that made that happen.
Right.
Of that I am convinced. And I'm not a nut. I'm very grounded. But I believe that there's more to all of it. So, question for you after that experience. Do you feel, we're all going to die. Do you feel any different about your mortality?
Well, I suppose I do, because part of the information that was coming to me involved a lot of philosophical things, one of which was that the idea that death is an illusion. And the best analogy to describe it, I would say, is that it's like the internet and laptops. Who we are as people is like the internet. It's a consciousness. Our bodies are like the laptop. When the laptop's broken, it doesn't mean the internet has gone. The internet's still there, but the laptop's broken. And that's how I feel about death.
And so do I. But there's always the feeling in the back of my mind that maybe this is just a story that we create for ourselves to make us feel not so worried about going. Unfortunately, my mind is balance. That's why the BBC is a good place for me, because BBC is all about balance. And I like that.
I mean, I'm like yourself, I don't claim to know, but I had an experience that gave me a lot of information that at the time absolutely felt like the most deeply profound truth.
Would you call
I've
that,
ever
listen,
felt.
I've interviewed many people who said these things. Would you call that a download of information that you had?
Yes.
So, okay, other people are having that experience. Maybe you should do a podcast, not necessarily featuring a guest, but featuring a number of guests that gets to the bottom of what that's all about, because you are not alone in having that experience. Start with David Icke. I'll give you his email address.
That would be awesome. That would be awesome.
I like David a lot. I get a certain amount of, I won't call it hate mail, but I get mail from people who don't like him. I think he's a valid guest to have on. I don't know whether half of what he says is right, but I find what he says very interesting. Uri Geller I put on my show. I know Uri. Uri used to live.
Friends with him.
Yeah, I've known Uri for 20 years or so. And Uri used to live in a huge, ridiculously massive mansion 1 mile from where we are now, very near George Clooney's place in Sonning. And I've interviewed Uri twice in that mansion. Uri used to come into my Talk Sports show on Sunday nights with his family, on Saturday nights with his family. And he'd say, Howard, I think it is much better to do the show here with you. And what we will do now, Howard, if it is okay with you, your clocks, your watches, If you have old clocks, old watches, get them out now and say, work, work. And you may find that your clock or watch will work. Well, we'd have people phoning up saying yes. One guy who said his digital camera, a guy in Ilford, Essex, who said, my digital camera, Howard, it's working now. It wasn't working before. Uri's made it work. So Uri, lived around here in this massive mansion I've been. It had a gym the size of a branch of Fitness First.
Wow.
I've never seen so much in somebody's home.
Is he a fit guy? I mean, I know he's slim, but is he fit?
Yeah, Uri is very wiry and very lithe. Yeah, totally. He has a cinema. I mean a cinema, like something from a multiplex in his home. Wow. That's where we did the last interview before he left for Israel.
I tell you what, Howard, that bending stuff pays off.
Well, he had a car that was covered in spoons, a Cadillac here in Berkshire. But I get mail from people who loathe Uri Geller when I have him on, and I get email from people who love him.
Right.
And as he will say, if he was here, he would say, Howard, if you are controversial, you are doing your job.
Yeah.
Nobody who is successful is without controversy. I'm sorry, I always go into the accent.
Yeah.
And that's true. I've been controversial. There are people who can't stand my voice on air. Howard Hughes loves the sound of his own voice. Crap, that's not true. This is me. Sorry, I'm now old enough to say, this is me. I can't do anything else or be anything else. So I can only be this.
Well, it would be awful if you hated the sound of your own voice.
I don't love it.
What a silly comment.
I don't think it's great. I need to be better. I wish I was. I wish I was a proper voiceover artist, one who could make money at it. Ideally. People say, oh, you must do so many voiceovers. You must make a lot. I don't. I do very few. I'd love to. That is such a craft. You know about this, Jason, see you. I love doing that.
Maybe you've just got the wrong agent. Maybe it's that one person. You need your Miss Jones of this generation who's going to help you.
Yeah, I could do with being helped a little in that department. I did have a great agent who was connected with television, and sadly we parted ways. And he got me a lot of the TV stuff. But ITV changed, and, it's a lot of the people that I knew, a lot of it's, there's personal contacts. If those people go, then you don't get the gigs anymore. And I don't get the last TV gig I did was, the comic Les Dawson?
Yes.
Great British comic.
Yeah.
They recreated him for ITV about 4 years ago in a 3D hologram. And it was brilliant.
Wow.
What a show. And they asked me if I'd do the intro for it. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Les Dawson. So I did that. And unusually, I didn't do it in the studio. I actually did it as an MP3 from home, as a sound file. And they just played it out on the show.
Wow.
But for a while, I was doing all sorts. I was doing an audience with, not all of them. I did an audience with the Bee Gees, Lulu, a few of those, but not all of them. I was booked to do an audience with Joan Rivers. And I did it. And I told my friends I'm going to be on an audience with Joan Rivers. And Joan arrived. I can tell this story now because she's no longer with us. But Joan arrived from America and decided she wanted, there was a comic she liked who she wanted doing the voiceover intro to the show. So I'm sitting there thinking, this is going to be my moment. Hey. And I wasn't on the show. Joan, why was I not the person for you?
Who did she want?
There was a young comic she used, I think.
A British comic.
A British person. And I got replaced. I still got the money, but I got replaced. So it wasn't all bad.
No, it wasn't all bad.
But I did a lot of telly in those days.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Well, you mentioned David Icke, and you said you like having him on your show. I've listened, I think, to all the David Icke episodes. I mean, you've had such incredible guests. Have you got sort of a top favorite that you just wish that they could just be guesting on the show all the time?
I like Richard Hoagland. I get a lot of hate mail from people who don't like him, and I get a lot of people saying, Hoagland's on the money. Hoagland is the face on Mars man. Okay?
Oh, okay.
He was the one who went on CNN and said there was a face on Mars. He is the best live performer I've ever come across. I got him involved in a conference in Liverpool called the Beyond Knowledge Conference a few years ago. They had a gap, and I said, Richard Hoagland might come over and do it. So they got him a flight and a hotel. He came to Liverpool, and he did a presentation about the rings of Saturn and what might be within them. I've never seen a person speak, I can't do it, for 2.5 hours using what we used to call slides. without a stumble, hesitation, or deviation. So he's at the top of my list. Uri Geller's box office. We always like Uri Geller because he'll put bums on seats, you know. So I know that my podcast numbers will go up if Uri's on. Amazing people. Dannion Brinkley, man who came back from the dead, he was on. A couple of times, I think he was hit by lightning and lived to tell the tale. If the story, use another Art Bell guest who I decided to get on. So, you know, there's a whole smorgasbord of people.
Yeah, I mean, you've had just so many. It must be hard to even remember them all off
I've
the
had
top
some,
of your head.
as we say here, I've had some duffers. I've had some people who, Art Bell used to say, you know, even he got bad guests sometimes, people who are not as good as you hope they would be.
Right.
And you try and bring them out of themselves. And sometimes you can't. But you have to let them be them.
Now, you do your show, it's not live, but you sort of go live to tape for a later broadcast.
I will
that correct?
only edit it if somebody says something defamatory or there's something that is factually, provably, obviously wrong in it.
Okay, right.
Apart from that, what you hear is what we did.
Right. And from when you record something, what's your turnover time normally till it goes on to iTunes?
Oh, it can be 2 hours or 2 days.
And that's
varies.
it. Is that the longest? You're looking at a couple of days before you get a show up?
Oh, absolute maximum.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
This
mean,
is where I'm feeling really crappy now.
Well, the last one, I mean, bear in mind, I'm still using Stone Age technology with minidisc. You have to copy the sound from the minidisc into the computer first, which gives me a chance to listen to it.
That's offsetting it for me, the fact that you're so quick with your turnaround.
Well, yeah, I've got it down to a fine art now.
Yeah, you have.
There's some software called Adobe Audition that a lot of us use
I know that.
for sound. And I was working doing an audio thing for a magazine, a radio magazine. Every month they used to pay me to voice this thing at home. The only thing is I had to teach myself Adobe Audition. So I had a horrendous 4 hours where I had the software, never used it before, and had to teach myself how to record audio on a computer.
Right.
So I now know that so well that it's in my DNA.
Yeah, a lot of DJs use Adobe Audition as well for radio shows.
I'm using 1.5 or something like that. It's a very old version.
Right.
But it hasn't changed markedly since then. But
Right.
you look, if you want to do podcasting, there's free software out there. There's Audacity, which is freeware. It's very good. I don't think it's as good as Adobe, but it doesn't cost any money. There are things like sometimes if the levels of the sound are a little variable, I'll put it through some software called Levelator, which is freeware. I don't, because I haven't got money. I don't spend money if I don't have to. And that'll even up the levels. Sometimes if a thing looks right on a waveform, to your ear, it's not right. So Levelator does it like the human ear.
That's good.
And then you'll go back to the waveform and think, that's all over the place.
Yeah.
But you listen to it and it's right.
Yeah, that's a good tip.
So I recommend Levelator.
Have you had, back to your show, have you had a chemtrail guy on your show?
No, I had one. Yes, I did. I had, what's that guy in America called? He's very famous. You'll know him. Oh, geez.
David Wilcock?
There was another guy I've had him on. Oh, Lord. And it'll come to me when we finished recording. But yes, I have done one short thing about that.
And what do you make of that? Are you in on that it's something fishy, or do you think it's just...
I haven't been convinced yet. It's rather like a HARP, you know, the low
weather
frequency
guys.
radar, whatever it is. What effects might that have? It's like people hear distant hums in the background in the middle of the Australian outback. We need to know more information. That's why we do the show.
Right.
We need to hear more.
learn more.
I am assured, though, that the shuttle crews did not see UFOs or aliens when they were up there. And I have that from Brian Duffy, shuttle commander. Guest on edition 285 or 6, I think, or 7.
I saw a very interesting thing, I think, in your list of podcasts on iTunes. I always look at the bars, you know, the health of the bar, because it shows how many downloads.
I never look at that. I always worry.
I'm fascinated by it because it always gives an indication of which the popular shows are.
Okay, are they any good?
Yeah. So I scanned your show, and here's what was really interesting, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name
David
right.
Paulides.
Yeah. Well, I would not have pronounced his name right. David Paulides. So way back, you had this guy on who I wasn't familiar with. So I'm scanning up your list of 289 podcasts. And the bars, as happens with all older shows, they grow smaller. But this big, heavy, full-on bar, second show, David Paulides. Then I keep scanning. Now I'm years ahead in your show. And again, this bar, David Paulides. So what's going on here that people are so fascinated with this guy?
Numerically, he is a very popular guest. And he is, I think, because he's compelling. But the rigor of his research is what does it for him. He talks about missing people. And the commonalities between missing persons cases, even in the UK, around the world. People go missing, sometimes they discard their shoes. Why would you, if you were in the middle of nowhere, in rough terrain, if the weather's bad, why would you take your shoes off?
Right.
It is fascinating to me, and it's fascinating to him. And he's just get his books. They're not easy to obtain in books. I don't think they're in bookstores. I think you've got to get them on Amazon. But I totally recommend them because in terms of writing and rigor of research, I don't know how he does it. He is amazing. There's also the guy behind the Haunted Skies series, John Hansen, and Bob Tibbetts works with him. The Haunted Skies series, I've never seen UFO cases chronicled so brilliantly. Wow. He's got eyewitness accounts. He's got original documents, photographs. God knows how he gets them all. I'm going to be writing the foreword for one of his upcoming books.
Great.
Those are amazing. But Dave Paulides, your audience can tell when somebody's good.
And his thing, everything that came up online about him was missing 411. Is that implying 411 people that he studied missing? Or is
I believe that's, like you watch these American dramas where they say, I've got a 482.
Like a code.
Down on Main Street.
Okay.
I think that's it.
It's a code for missing person, maybe, 411?
Yeah, like old TV shows on YouTube, like Dragnet.
I see.
I've got a 280.
Right.
You've got a 280 happening downtown.
That makes so much more sense to me. Because I was thinking, God, if he started all his work with these 411 cases, it must be frustrating as more people.
He's actually documented thousands of cases now.
Wow.
And whenever we do a show, he asks me to cherry pick from the current book one of the 10, 12 of the cases that I like. So I go through the books. I don't have lots of time to do reading.
No, you're busy.
I have to do a journalist speed read and scan. But I seem to pick on the right cases without quite knowing how.
Well, it's your psychic instincts leading you.
All right, let's try an experiment, and it's going to bomb terribly, and it'll be very funny when it does. Who's John? Why is John important?
He's a friend of yours that you want me to meet.
No, he's not. Is there a John in your life somewhere?
I have a John that I know.
This John is important to you?
Yes. Well, he's been an important person.
Okay, well, he's very forceful, whoever he is, because he wanted me to mention you to you, because it might prove something to you. Now, look, that's ridiculous and nuts, isn't it? Please, I am not a crazy man.
You saying that will make me write him an email, because I haven't been in touch for a long time.
All right, well, John's...
I'll send him an email.
Is this professional or personal?
He's a professional person, yeah.
It's going to be important, whatever it is.
All right.
John.
I'm going to email him today.
I saw it in big letters, and I'm not... Please don't email me. I'm not a psychic, okay? I'm still skeptical about all of this. I believe in balance, broadcasting codes and all the rest of it. But John.
Well, thank you for that, Howard.
Yeah. Tell me what happens about it. Yeah?
I will tell you what happens. And I also want to be aware, I know you had said we had a time cap, and I want to be respectful of your time.
We've done more than 2 hours.
Have we?
Yeah.
Wow.
Haven't we?
I'm at 1:59 and 19 seconds. But
right,
if you're going to exaggerate...
Far be it from me to do that. But I think we're pretty much done.
Okay.
No, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Let's do a part 2.
Yes, okay, fine.
And look, let me apologize to you right now in these dying seconds for we just couldn't get together a slot to do this. So I was determined to do this because I've got a couple of days off now. So this is the glide path into my few days off. But also, it's the 18th of March and it's my mother's birthday. So it's a good date to do it.
Well, I'm super grateful to you for doing this. And it's partly been my fault because I've been out of the country so much. And I can tell you a quick reading thing, and you can tell me if I'm way off. And this is a perception thing, that you're a lot, because I've only just met you for this podcast, but that you have a lot more emotions than people realize. And you like to surround yourself with things that support your emotions. That's a thing.
Well, people think that I am so into radio, massively. People think the word they use here is anorak, because radio enthusiasts wear anoraks and hang around radio stations. Hello, can I have your autograph, please? And thank God for them. So I am very, very into it. But I love the trees and the animals and all the rest of it. You know, that's me very much.
You're much more sensitive than people would be led to believe.
I don't know if I sound like, I guess I'm doing my job when I'm being a broadcaster. And that's why I'm delighted for once in my life that the people who hear the podcast realize somehow through that voice comes a person. And that's lovely. And the nice thing about the BBC here, I do a breakfast show on Saturday mornings, which you've just seen me finish. And I read the news a bit. And then, of course, there's my talk radio show on the commercial side of things on Sunday nights. But the BBC here have just let me go on the road. You've seen it today. I was just me, really. I used to admire smooth people who could be really smooth on air and be word perfect and not or And I've realized I don't have to beat myself up anymore because I can't do that. I don't. I'm free. It's cool. I'm out of jail. I can just be me. And it's lovely if you like it. And if you don't, well, there's nothing I can do about that. And I spent years, decades, worrying about what people thought of me and trying to make them understand the person that I'm underneath the image that they might have. And now I just go and do it.
What
really.
A great breakthrough. I mean, literally to be able to have that confidence to just be yourself on air, on live radio is fantastic.
Part of it is ceasing to care, and part of it is no longer worrying that I won't have a word to say. Because as you can tell, somebody said to me last night, you can talk the hind leg off a donkey. It's a Gemini thing. I no longer have to worry about that. There aren't many things that leave me speechless. There was one thing that did leave me speechless once, though.
You need to write it down?
I can tell you this one. It's a little naughty, but it's okay.
We'll end on a naughty story.
The most requested item on Capital Radio was an item called Howard's Paper Panties. We did a Caribbean cruise. We broadcast live from a Caribbean cruise, which I don't think anybody had ever done before, by satellite. With Carnival Cruises, they were very nice to us. And, we had a lovely time. We had to do it twice because of the time difference. First time we went out there, Chris had broken his ankle, couldn't walk properly. But the first time we went out there was to record the little features because we were broadcasting to England in the nighttime, 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning, okay, given the time difference.
Right.
So we had to go there just before Christmas to record everything, and the show was in February or March, I think. So we went back a second time onto the cruise ship. And, oh God, what was I? See, look at that. It's the 3:30 in the morning.
Massage? Was it to do with massage?
Howard's Paper Panties. Thank
Howard's
you.
Paper Panties.
So part of it, I always had to do the things that he wouldn't do. So anything that involved A, embarrassment, or B, severe personal risk, I had to do them, whatever they were. And I would be the one who went down the slides, climbing things, anything that involved the potential you might get killed or deeply embarrass yourself. So I had to go to the beauty parlor and be massaged, which wasn't so bad. They were very professional about it. But I was not going to appear naked in front of my colleagues, male and female. Because, they're going back to London. Would you want to be starkers in front of your colleagues?
No, definitely not.
No, so I didn't want to.
Only for money. For money.
Well, if they'd offered me some cash, maybe a different thing. But they said, okay, Howard, we have the answer to this. Howard, we've got some paper panties here. So they got the largest size of paper panties on and put them around my private, accoutrements. And then started covering me in seaweed and doing all the things that they do. So part of the end of it is I'm lying on my front. And Tarrant says, oh, you're enjoying this, aren't you? And I said, well, it's rather nice. He said, and then he says, oh, I might do a little bit of knuckling now. And I said, you're not going to bloody knuckle me. Literally. And then he said, well, the phone will probably go to answer phone before very long. Do you want to pause while we do?
That's okay.
All right, we'll just let it ring.
We're in the boss's office at the BBC. So
I'm sure
he doesn't know.
It might be the boss himself.
It could be security.
Yeah, very nice man. So at the end of it all, I'm thinking that was such an embarrassing experience. I go in the shower, right? And I think finally I can have some dignity. And I'm showering away, washing off all the seaweed. And a voice appears over the top of the shower cubicle door and says, "Oh my God, Howard, you're hung like a horse."
Oh!
It's Tarrant. And that's how the thing ends. And it became the most requested item. I had to let go of any inhibitions that I might have had when I did that. He used to do the most bizarre things. Twice when I was on air and reading the news, he tried to set fire to my hair with a lighter, and I had to keep reading. And he was very good at doing it because he kept his hand between my hair and the lighter, so my hair was just about not going to catch fire.
Wow.
Because that would have been, I mean, I'd have even less hair than I've got now.
He sounds kind of cruel, this
no, he's not.
affable character.
He's not cruel. Is very edgy.
Prankster, a bit of a prankster.
Yeah, and, this is entertainment. And I was from news, so I had to get with the program.
So this whole hung like a horse thing, did that go out to air?
Which thing?
The whole hung like a horse.
Oh, that, yes, that.
So, and
that was one. That's no fake news there, by the way. That's completely factual. I think you'll find.
Well, I would just
your
like
dog
to
is
say,
looking at me very strangely, by the way. You've got your dog here.
For a shy gentleman,
I mentioned the word horse, didn't I?
He's mentioned the word horse. He's mentioned that is a verified fact. Feel free to send your phone numbers via the Grey Escape, and I will pass them along to Howard Hughes.
Oh, now I will be accused of touting. Another thing that Chris Tarrant used to say is, "You are shameless." I interviewed Miss Hawaii, who was beautiful, came to the hotel in Maui where we were doing the show from. And I took her down to the beach for acoustic reasons, away from everybody else, so we could get a nice personal interview, and brought her back. And he used to say, "Howard, you are shameless. You use your microphone as an extension of your you-know-what." Which wasn't true. I was just being nice. But he always used to say, "You and Miss Hawaii." Oh, God. Amazing times. And we've only scratched the surface of it. But, I've loved these radio years. They've been great.
And this is
I want to do more.
Part of the journey. I was going to say, there'll probably be a day you'll look back and look at this as still the early years.
Well, there are people who, once you get north of 40, want to write you off and put you in the heritage bin. And that may work for commercial and accounting reasons, but you can't do that with everybody. And I will not be put in the heritage bin.
No, it's absurd.
The hell with it. I will find my own way. There's always another way. A friend of mine recently found himself, I think, without a gig. And I've said this to a number of friends, actually. There's always another way. All you've got to do is find it.
Right.
You cannot allow yourself to be stopped. If there's something you want to do.
Right. Also, there's really no excuse in this day and age because of the mediums that are available to us for free, like YouTube and iTunes. It's
the mainstream
amazing.
media is afraid of people like you and me because, all right, I do mainstream media to pay my bills. I have to make a living, to pay the gas bill, phone bill, all the other bills, just about. But I'm still seen by many as a sort of pioneer of the alternative media. Yeah. It's the future. And a lot of big media organizations are scared of this. And I think rightly so, because they will never be able to recreate what we do, because they have production departments and accountants and teams of producers and various people who won't get it in the middle. That's why Art Bell was so great, because he did it. All right, he was working for a big corporation, ultimately, but the show was his, done from his home, his way. That's the future, Natalie.
Yeah, I think so too.
And it's here. If the audience likes you, great. If they don't like you, change, and then they might like you. If they really don't like you, then you're in the wrong game.
I saw a graph, and I actually posted it. It's on my Twitter feed, and it shows the growth of podcasts versus the erosion of radio. And literally you've got this one flat line of the horizon, and podcasts are skyrocketing. The hours people listen to podcasts versus traditional radio, which is plummeting.
If my postman, two different post people actually, can come to my door listening to my podcast, not knowing that they were coming to my door, the guy who does the podcast, randomly. And I can meet people who've heard the podcast and I don't know them. That's a wake-up call for the people in the corporations, but there's nothing they can do about it. It's happening. There's no way that I think any of them can change their model to meet this.
Right.
Because they cannot. Their models don't allow the passion that we have for what we do. That is the difficulty, I think, with a lot of mainstream media, that a lot of it is done more and more for money and then ratings secondarily. Well, at one of the places I worked, an executive explained to me how it was a good thing to make a business decision that lost you listeners, but made you money.
Wow.
That it was more important to make business decisions that lost you listeners, but made you cash.
Wow.
Now, in the days when I did Capital Radio, we did a good radio show, whatever it cost to put on first, and the numbers followed. These days, a lot of it is the other way around.
Right.
The money is first, it's done to a budget, and then you try and get some listeners. Or you do some sponsorship deals, business deals that make you the money anyway. Who cares about the audience?
Right.
And sadly, that's not the kind of radio that I grew up with. And that's not all of it. Before people think that I'm damning the industry, please don't think so. I love this industry. It gives me a living, and I know some wonderful people in it. But there is a trend that is moving in that direction.
Yeah.
And that trend, by people who are cleverer than I, needs to be looked at.
Well, I think you're speaking the truth. And I, again, implore people to check out the Unexplained with Howard Hughes podcast. I'll make sure I have links to it from my website. And I'm just so grateful. There's something really fun I'd love to do to close this podcast. I'm sat in the room with two amazing voiceover talents and voices. I want you to close the show, both of you, as Chris Tarrant.
Oh, okay.
All right. Do you want to do it on a countdown?
Thank you. You can both somehow work your way out of the show, and I will say officially, thank you so much, Howard, for taking time out.
And what's your website address?
thegreyescape.com.
Cool. We'll meet again.
I will leave you with the Tarrants.
Right.
Okay.
I'm Chris Tarrant.
Oh, yeah, I'm Chris Tarrant too.
No, look, there's only one Chris Tarrant, and here he is.
That's me.
Oh, for God's sake, stop this pretense, for God's sake. No,
I'm
it's
the
me.
real Chris Tarrant. Okay, do the laugh. I don't do it like that. No, it's totally wrong. No, sorry.
And look, what this proves is he is a great broadcaster. Why? Because we're talking about him.
He's in your consciousness.
Doing impressions.
Yeah, you've embodied him. Well, thank you both, Jason Canning and Howard Hughes. And I can't wait to listen to more of The Unexplained.
Yeah.
Howard Hughes, thank you again. And thanks to the impromptu guest spot by VO artist Jason Canning. And thank you, Chris Tarrant, for not holding this against any of us. How about that, people? Did you get your tech fix? Are you seeing careers in broadcasting in a new light? And most importantly, do you think our Paul McCartney is the real guy? Check out thegreyescape.com for bonus extras, links to the stuff mentioned in this show, where to find Howard's show, The Unexplained, and of course, the selfie of me and Howard. Don't forget, for any international money transfers, sending your loot overseas, you can save 90% over bank fees and PayPal and get the best exchange rate and a free transfer just by going to thegreyescape.com/cash. And I'll bring it full circle. Thank you again for your patience for this episode. Thank you again, Howard Hughes. And thank you to my aunt, who has and will always be an important person in my life. Stay well, people, and I'll catch you next time on The Grey Escape. Now, he said he was hung like a horse. There have got to be pictures online.